Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd now like to call the September 10th, 2024 Longmont City Council regular session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel. It can also be viewed at longmontpublicmedia.org/watch or Comcast channels 8 or 880. May we have a roll call, please, Don?
Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Christ.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Here.
Councilmember McCoy.
Present.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Let's stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a message to the public, in accordance with Council's rules of procedure, the rules for providing public comment are only Longmont residents and employees of the City of Longmont may speak during first call public invited to be heard. You must provide your address on the sign-up sheet before the meeting, or I'm not going to call your name. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Anyone may speak at the second reading on or public hearing item, and you are asked to add your name to the speaker list for that specific item before the meeting. Anyone may speak during the final call public invited to be heard. Members of the audience shall refrain from disruptive, vulgar, or abusive language, applause, heckling, or other actions that interfere with the orderly function of the council. We are now at the approval of minutes. Can I have a motion for the August 27th minutes?
I move August 27, 2024 regular session minutes as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy and seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. I'm sorry, mine's taking a little bit longer than I thought.
You could tell me virtually, Mayor. Oh,
Got it.
thank you.
That passes unanimously. Thank you. We have item 9 is, I'm going to let you take this, Dawn.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's a revision of the agenda.
Just an additional corrected IGA for Resolution 2024-65 that was uploaded. So you should see that it's marked revised.
Thank
And
you.
would ask that you adopt the revised IGA,
Okay,
if passed.
okay. Do we have any counselors that would like to add agenda items to future agendas? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the city manager's report.
No report, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. We have a couple of proclamations tonight. The first one, and I want to make a statement here about this one. I said that I would go ahead and read this proclamation because the Center for Disabilities is in our city, and people with disabilities have a very difficult time in voting. So this is more about the democratic process rather than about a certain party. So it's a proclamation designating September 9th through the 13th, 2024 as Disability Voting Rights Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas there are over 60 million people with disabilities of all ages living in every community in the United States, making up almost a quarter of the country's population, and over 38 million eligible voters with disabilities. Whereas the disability community has a critical interest in policies and decisions made and enacted at local, state, and national levels that impact our lives directly. Whereas voting is one way for the disability community to have a say in the people and policies that impact our communities. Whereas Rev Up, which stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power, is a national nonpartisan effort to build a civic engagement in the disabilities community and improve election accessibility. whereas the Rev Up movement was built by grassroots disabled activists and is rooted in the power of local leaders and the belief that change happens at the state and local level. Whereas the Center for People with Disabilities with members of National Cross-Disability Community are organizing the 7th Annual Disability Voting Rights Week with events around the country. Now, therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me, and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the week of September 9th through the 13th, 2024, as Disability Voting Rights Week in Longmont, and supports the growing involvement of the disability community in the political process. Is there someone here that would like to speak on this behalf?
Thank you. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Peck. That was wonderful to hear. I'm Maria Stepanian. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for People with Disabilities. I'm here with my colleague, Craig Towell, Community Organizer, and we have been advocating for equity and accessibility in election processes for people with disabilities. And having the proclamation read is part of that effort as we try to educate and bring awareness and teach election judges about accessibility needs and voting machines to be working and all the other wonderful work that we do at the Center for People with Disabilities. Thank you very much for reading the proclamation and recognizing the week as the Voting Disability Rights for People with Disabilities.
Thank you. Maria, we usually ask if you want a picture taken with council as you receive that. So can you come down this way?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oops, excuse me. So we have another proclamation. And this is a proclamation designating September 15th through the 21st, 2024, as National Co-Responders and Crisis Responders Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas the City of Longmont is committed to providing support for those facing behavioral health issues in our community, and where behavioral health describes emotions and behaviors that affect an individual's overall well-being, including mental health disorders and substance use. And whereas the National Institute of Mental Health estimates that more than 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness, and the National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that over 100,000 overdose deaths occur annually as widespread opioid use continues across the nation and in our community. And whereas the many issues created by mental illness, substance abuse, and addiction are community problems, not limited to law enforcement, fire service, and emergency medical staff. And the City of Longmont has recognized the need to address these crisis issues through an evidence-based program called Co-Response. And whereas the Longmont Department of Public Safety's Co-Response team, which is CORE, is a specially trained unit comprised of police officers, behavioral health clinicians, and paramedics who assist individuals with behavioral health and substance use conditions, diverting them from the criminal justice system and emergency rooms and redirecting them to appropriate treatment destinations. And whereas the City of Longmont Core Team responds to more than 2,800 mental health crisis calls per year and engages in over 5,000 contacts with our community members annually. Now therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor by virtue and the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the week of September 5th through the 21st, 2024, as National Co-Responders and Crisis Responders Week in Longmont, and recognize, honor, and give thanks to the professionals for their daily service to assist those in need. Do I have any members of the core team here? Great. Would you like to say a few words about what you do? Thank you.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the proclamation. My name's Andy Feaster. I'm a sergeant with the police department, and my job is to oversee the amazing humans that comprise the core team. We got 3 of them with us here tonight. Come on. You wave at me, but you're coming down here. First in line is one of our mental health clinicians, Maeve Widman. Second, one of our officers, Sean Carey. And third, one of our paramedics, Omar Norgais. For those that don't know, our co-responder team is comprised of officers, paramedics, and mental health clinicians. And we send all 3 professions in one vehicle to behavioral health calls for service in an effort to provide a package, a 3-pronged package of service to those that were out there, serving. So we've got a safety package, we've got a mental health package, and a medical package, all looking at the situation and the complex problem from different professional viewpoints, trying to solve the problem as best we can. So these guys are out there every day doing this work. We've got several other members of this team who couldn't be here tonight, but are here in spirit, so to speak, out there doing the same work that these 3 are. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for the recognition.
You do amazing work. Thank you so much for being in our community. I would like a picture with police officers in mental health.
Yeah, she didn't ask. You're not asking.
We're now at first call, public invited to be heard. And remember that we would like your name and address as you come up, and you have 3 minutes. The first one on the list is Robert Morris. Is Robert here?
No, he's coming.
Oh, there you are.
Hi, my name is Robert Morris. I live at 170 South Pratt Parkway. First off, I'd like to say I am a member of the disability community here in Longmont, so I certainly appreciate the reading of the proclamation that happened, and I certainly appreciate the city's commitment to actionable change as far as making voting more accessible within the city. The second thing I'd like to address, in this country, we are allowed 3 unalienable rights, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, sometimes that responsibility falls on the community to remove the barriers to those rights, because even the most well-meaning of bureaucratic processes can take time. So today I'm here to shine some light on an event that's happening this weekend on Saturday the 14th from 12 o'clock at noon till 4 at Second Baptist Church in Boulder. They're having their Heartbeat for the Homeless event, which will have food, clothing, harm reduction, many things to help folks get ready for the winter incoming. So we can make sure that enough people, that as many people as possible make it to the endings of those slow-moving bureaucratic processes. So if you are in contact with someone who is unhoused, I would like you to encourage them to come over there. Even if they don't need something specific like toiletries, we will be giving out bus passes, things like that as well. So hopefully you can reach out to friends, family, the other members of the community who need a little bit of help, and we'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Ellen Leonard?
My name's Alan Leonard, 2256 Aegean Way here in Longmont. I'm also the secretary for the Longmont Elks, and thank you, Mayor, for allowing us to come and visit and let the people know a little bit about who we are instead of just that big old building on the corner of 3rd and Kaufman. My family moved here when I was 4 years old. My wife is a 3rd-generation Longmont person, and I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. The second week of September is recognized by the Elks as Patriotism Week, and our lodge is going to be celebrating some of those events with a 9/11 service tomorrow on 9/11 at our lodge, as well as a rededication of our POW MIA table. And for all these, the public is welcome to attend. This Sunday, we'll also be doing a flag retirement service. The Elks has a special flag retirement service. We hold that every year out in Hygiene. And again, the council members or anyone who would like to attend is welcome to. A little bit about our lodge, just general information so people know who we are. We have a long history of charity to this community, starting back on December 27th, 1906. And to date, we are well over $7 million in like-kind contributions to the city of Longmont, making it a better place. A couple of our more notable contributions came to the Memorial Building, the city's Memorial Building back in the 50s and 60s, as well as the original Longmont United Hospital out on Mountain View back then too. We have many programs with youth activities and veterans, and I encourage anyone that would like to know more about our organization, please go to elks.org. We have some pamphlets if we'd like to distribute those, but we appreciate your time. Thank you for the opportunity to letting us visit with you, and thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Dennis Klein.
Good evening, Mayor Peck, council members, citizens. My name is Dennis Klein. I'm at 306 Kaufman in Longmont. On behalf of the Elks, I am the Exalted Ruler, CEO, President for this fraternal year 2024-2025. At this time, I'd like to extend an open invitation to the mayor, to the council members, and to all citizens for 2 public events that we're hosting this week to recognize events that have happened in this country. One of them is tomorrow, 9/11. It's at 7 p.m. at our lodge. Tomorrow we will remember those that perished and those that continue to perish and struggle through life as the event of 9/11, 2001. We will also, as Mr. Lenort had mentioned, is rededicate our POW MIA table. The POW MIA table can be found in any Elks Lodge across the United States of America, and it will be set as a place setting, much like at our own homesteads, until all POWs have returned home and or all those that are identified as missing in action will be laid to rest and or recovered until they're on U.S. soil. The last event that we're hosting as an open to the public event is a flag retirement. Throughout the year, flags are donated, weathered flags are donated to our lodge and to other veterans associations and other places throughout the community. We assemble those and we give the weathered flags the proper dignity of retiring them properly per flag etiquette. If you are coming to the flag retirement, it's held at a member's residence on the west end of town here. And if you're coming to that, the lodge will be providing hot dogs and hamburgers. If you're coming, please bring a side to share. Please bring your own drink, and we will have tables and chairs available, but depending on those that are, how many that show up, the chairs may be limited. Lastly, we have this event being attended by a representative of Congressman Negrisi's office. Unfortunately, the congressman will be doing his service work for the community in Washington, D.C., and he's unable to attend. Again, thank you very much for your time and for your continued support. If anybody wonders what happens in that building at 306 Kaufman, please feel free to stop by, ring the doorbell. We'd be happy to give you an escort and share more about the Elks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jamie Seymour.
Jamie Seymour, 517 Independence Drive. On June 25th, City Council, led by Mayor Joan Peck and seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, directed staff to modify the Longmont Development Code to exempt developments that provide on-site affordable housing from the requirement to install buffers between said development and any adjacent open space. The motion passed unanimously. Currently, Chapter 15.050040, Paragraph E, states that developments proposed to be adjacent to public parks, greenways, natural areas, and other public open spaces shall be separated from the parks, natural areas, etc., by public streets or a landscape buffer. Are we really saying that requiring a 20 or 30-foot buffer of landscaping between an apartment building or condo and open space is so onerous that removing that requirement will suddenly cause developers to provide the 12% affordable unit requirement rate rather than paying the cash in lieu? The number of 4- and 5-story buildings with 12% affordable units, another incentive, says otherwise. I would love to know how many developers actually build the affordable units in order to get the multiple incentives the city waves in front of their faces. This is a bad precedent to set for our parks and open spaces that they can be so easily bartered away. I can only assume Natural Resources was once again not consulted on this measure, not to mention Planning and Zoning, which is meant to advise you. I will also call out the motion by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Mayor Peck, directing staff to amend the preliminary plat review process to remove the public hearing process and replace it with a 2-week appeal period. Thank you to Councilors Rodriguez and Christ for their dissent. Again, I seriously doubt that public input on a development is so onerous to the developer that removing it will cause them to build the 12% affordable units. Maybe look to purchasing land or blighted property with buildings that have stood vacant for years to spend some of the cash in lieu on your own affordable housing. And I don't mean taking land meant for open space and building housing either. Get creative and think outside the box. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Sherry Malloy.
Sherry Malloy, 1632 Sherman Way. Thank you again for referring the open space tax measure to this fall's ballot. I've been talking to a lot of residents, and nearly all have been very favorable toward voting yes on 3A. I'm here to speak to 9A, which includes 4 big changes to our code on land use regulations to give incentives to developers to build the required 12% affordable housing rather than paying cash in lieu. I take issue with the premise that carrots need to be given to developers to adhere to this basic requirement. I don't get a bonus for paying my bills or taxes on time as required. Developers of multifamily units already get a bonus story if they include the 12% requirement in their building plans. Why this push for them to build? It's pretty obvious most don't want to because they want to maximize their profits. Cash in lieu works just swell. It gives the city a lot of resources to build these units and, more importantly, gives control over location relative to public transportation, parks, schools, shopping, etc. Cash in lieu also allows the city to include council priorities for efficiency and sustainability. Cash in lieu is a good thing. How this agenda item came before you tonight is problematic. This is not the proper way to do a planning process. Relaxing land use regulations to benefit development is suspect. Recommendation number 1 under 9A removes the preliminary plat review and public hearing process and restricts residents' rights to appeal. This isn't good public policy. That said, I can see the rationale in terms of time saved. So, while I personally don't agree with number 1, from an incentive-only perspective, it makes sense. Likewise, numbers 3 and 4 also make sense if you're only looking through the lens of incentives. Number 2, removing open space buffer requirements on parcels adjacent to parks and open space has no credible rationale and should be removed. This doesn't improve the planning process nor make things more efficient. It simply gives the developer more land while compromising open spaces and especially our parks and greenways. If you support this, development will be right next to parks and greenways with ugly fences right along the property line. The whole purpose of greenways and parks is to enjoy space, and this compromises that. Removing this buffer would also set a very bad precedent. What's next? Doing away with the riparian protection setback for affordable housing? Number 2 also has a huge public perception problem. People continue to be very upset about the Kanemoto open space property. When land is open space, people rightfully assume this means protected from development. While that Kanemoto is a completely different situation, the point is the optics of changing any open space policy that relaxes rules for development does not play out well for policymakers such as yourselves. You can avoid all that potential drama by removing recommendation number 2.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Matt Menza.
Matt Menza, 2235 Parkview Drive. Mayor Peck and the City Council. Hey, thank you for what we did last session with Modern West 2. I think your decision was spot on. I'm here to talk about the airport a little bit. I'm a professional aviator, former Navy pilot, and I still fly a lot. I've flown 600 hours in the last 12 months, so I'm a pretty active pilot. Everywhere I travel in this country, when I see a thriving city or a thriving town, it has a thriving airport. And it's good to see that the council here is taking steps to think about some lessons learned and start to think about how to protect that airport. And I think there's some lessons learned and things we need to do to ensure that that airport grows and thrives. And there's secondary and tertiary effects of why having a healthy airport is healthy for all of us. Grows the community, connects the community, gives a lot of opportunities for business and science and aviation and aerospace to come to Longmont. I think that going forward, I would like to see if there's a way we can help you, the Airport Advisory Board or some of the other aviators in the community, help you all figure out a way to create a framework or a checklist so whenever we have development around the airport, we can protect it.
You need to stay away from, this is a quasi-judicial issue still, part of it.
Okay, yep, sorry, I'm not familiar with all the rules in terms of what we have to talk about, so I apologize.
That's fine.
But we have a lot going on out there at the airport, and we'd really like to see that grow, and we'd love to see your support and take opportunities to grow. This weekend, thank you for your support. We have an air show. This is the first air show we've had in a long time. There's some folks in the community that have worked really hard on this, and I hope to see you all out there. I hope the community comes out there to see it. It's really important that we share aviation with the community and show you how great it is. And we really appreciate your support. And we hope going forward we can continue to preserve that airport and grow it. And I really look forward to working with you on doing that. So thank you again very much.
You're welcome. I do see pilots out there still in the audience, so we need to make sure that the Modern West 2, Modern West 1, those are quasi-judicial matters still in discussion. So I would like you to respect that. And the next person is JD Lights. Okay. And I hope I pronounced this correctly, Zoe. Is it
Galloway, Zoe Galloway. Yeah.
Okay.
At 308 South Anderson Street. So 1 month ago, I was displaced from my house because an AMI smart meter was placed on my home. I was experiencing symptoms of sore throats, vertigo, severe brain fog, shaking, chest pains, inability to concentrate, muscle cramps, and more. I still cannot go into my house for longer than 20 minutes without developing sore throats and migraines. But I didn't come here to talk about me today. I came here to ask you to create an awareness for EMF radiation harm within our community. I I have 15,000 pages of science dating back over 30 years from thousands of peer-reviewed research from hundreds of scientists and doctors, and they all say the same things. I have one here that shows a test that was done on cellular towers placed near frog eggs and tadpoles. Those under the control group, they were protected with a Faraday cage, had a mortality rate of 4.2%. Those that were unprotected had a mortality rate of 90%. There's another study that a rat that was exposed to a cellular phone for only 2 hours within its life experienced permanent damage to the blood-brain brain, and an autopsy 50 days later found to have damaged and destroyed 2% of the animal's brain cells. There's one study where, or it wasn't a study, it was a case in India where a cellular tower was placed on top of a residential building. Within 4 months, one woman had brain cancer, a child died of birth defects, one child was born with cancer in its spine, and 9 others died soon after that, including a 17-year-old. What we have here is between the AMI smart meters and if we continue to place more 5G towers within this city, I can see that we're going to have one of the greatest environmental and human catastrophes in the 21st century. This is serious. And so I came here today to ask to speak with the council. I sent you all an email asking if I can show you the science, not just for me. I want to move back into my own home, but I can't at the moment. But I have, it's thousands of articles. And one even shows that if you stand within 3 feet of this AMI smart meter, that it emits, it's 116 times more powerful than a cellular phone. And you can't turn it off. You can't put it into another room and stay away from it while you sleep because it's, so.
Thank you, Zoe. Did you bring copies for us? Is that what that is?
I can give you this if you'd like. I can also email you more. I have more. This is just a little bit, but okay.
Keith Griffith.
I'll have to execute the missed approach on my comments because it's about Modern West 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. John Grunsfeld.
John Grunsfeld, 229 Airport Road. I want to thank all of you for the marathon session a couple of weeks ago. Again, I was just enormously impressed by your stamina and attention to all the detail. I think we all want low-cost housing in Longmont, and I think through the process of the last issue, we've discovered that there are some holes in the urban planning, city planning process. And I know there's some, at least a couple of ordinance issues on the agenda tonight addressing the same thing. The current process is apparently too stovepiped to catch, all of the various aspects, including public safety, as an example. Not that you're not concerned about public safety. I have no worries about that, but the planning process is relatively narrow and following, very specific ordinances. And we've just heard about some of the open space considerations with previous speakers. So I don't have an answer for you, but it's a challenge that I think Longmont would well benefit from finding ways to either incorporate or change the planning office ordinances, processes, procedures to be able to consider, the broader environment, so that if you're looking at a particular approval process, that you make sure that, the transportation department is able to fully weigh in, that the public does have the opportunity to comment on all developments with sufficient time, and that this, the specific distance requirements that may be 300 feet or even 1,000 feet don't always consider the longer range impacts, for instance, the airport. And I'm sure there's other instances and examples. I think the city does a pretty good job on, looking at the transportation impacts from surface transportation and, water quality and those kind of things. And I would just encourage the council to work with the planning department to open the aperture on some of the other considerations so that Longmont can maintain, the great quality of life while at the same time enabling low-cost housing and other things. And finally, I'll just put in my plug again. If you have an opportunity on Saturday, come out to the Longmont Airport. It's going to be a great community event, and you'll see the excitement that the airport provides to the community, and the community getting excited about the activities at the airport. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. John Limke.
Good evening. My name is John Lemke. I live at 744 Stonebridge Drive. I'm here to talk about a topic that's really important to me. I'm missing bedtime stories with my two daughters that Mayor Peck and Councilwoman Christ met at Unity in the Community. I'm talking about a voting reform called ranked choice voting. I'm going to argue that we should implement both forms. There's a single winner, ranked choice voting, which would be for offices like mayor, and multi-winner, which would be for at-large seats for city council. I'm here, in short, to ask council to refer ranked choice voting to the ballot. If voters were to approve it, we would amend the city charter, and then we could use ranked choice voting in city council and mayoral elections in the future. Fort Collins, Broomfield, and Boulder have all implemented, and they'll be using ranked choice voting in the future. I think my most powerful argument to you is it reduces the influence of money. So places that implement ranked choice voting, they see a big decrease, about a 30% decrease in the person with the most money winning. So you don't need to raise as much in order to win. Main argument against is people will tell you that it is hard for people to rank their candidates. And I'll tell you, if you can rank your favorite ice cream flavors between vanilla, chocolate, and cookie dough, I think that you can rank candidates. One of the other benefits, people are happier. It ensures that the winning candidate gets over 50% of the vote. Down in Aurora, their current mayor won with about 36% of the vote. It was a three-way split, and he won by just a few percentage points. The way you think about it is simple. You rank who you love, who you like, and who you can live with. A lot of the hardest parts have been overcome. The state legislature passed House Bill 21-1071, ranked choice voting in nonpartisan elections. So the Secretary of State has written all the rules for tabulation. All the county clerks have bought all the machines and licenses to do the tabulation. There's robust auditing processes that exist to make sure the counts are accurate. And the nonprofit that I'm involved with, RCV for Colorado, has training materials for candidates, the clerks, and anyone else, any other stakeholder. So thank you, council. I look forward to working with you in the community to implement ranked choice voting here in Longmont. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Seeing no one else on the list, I will close first call public invited to be heard. We are now at our consent agenda. An introduction and reading by title of first reading ordinances. Dawn, would you read the consent agenda into the, yes, record?
Record, absolutely. Mayor, the second reading and public hearing for all ordinances introduced on this consent agenda will be held on September 24th, 2024. Item 9A is ordinance 2024-60, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 15 of the Longmont Municipal Code on land use regulations and planning approval processes to further incentivize affordable housing unit generation. And just as a side note, this was on the last regular session agenda but was not addressed, so we're just starting over again. 9B is ordinance 2024-64, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2024. 9C is ordinance 2024-65, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of one access and utility easement and one general utility easement located within the boundaries of Westview Acres subdivision, generally located at 8791 North 87th Street, west of Airport Road and south of Glen Eyre Drive. 9D is ordinance 2024-66, A bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the concept plan amendment to the Westview Acres concept plan, generally located west of Airport Road and south of Pike Road. 9E is ordinance 2024-67, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of 2 LPC easements, 2 utility easements, 2 sanitary sewer and water easements, and 2 drainage easements located within the boundary of lots 5 and 6 of Irwin Thomas First Filing Final Plat, generally located at 200 Bountiful Avenue, west of Harvest Moon Drive and south of East Ken Pratt Boulevard and Costco. 9F is Resolution 2024-61, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the agreement between the city and Kutak Rock LLP for construction law and construction defect litigation special counsel services. 9G is Resolution 2024-62, a resolution of the Longmont City Council denying the concept plan amendment application for a portion of the Schlegel-Williams annexation known as the Modern West 2 development, generally located south of Rogers Road and east of Airport Road. 9H is Resolution 2024-63, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and County of Broomfield, the County of Boulder, and the City of Boulder concerning participation in the Home Consortium. 9I is Resolution 2024-64, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing the exercise of the city's power of eminent domain to acquire certain real property interests necessary for public purposes in connection with the St. Vrain Greenway Trail project. And 9J is Resolution 2024-65, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Boulder Regional Emergency Telephone Service Authority for public safety answering point funding.
Are there any counselors who would like to pull items from the consent agenda? Counselor Hidalgo Faring.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pull 9A.
So was I. We're all going to pull it. Counselor Christ.
9D. No, I'm not turned on. Thank you. 9D and 9I, please.
Okay. I am going to move the consent agenda minus items 9A, 9D, 9I.
Second.
It's been moved by myself, seconded by Counselor Hidalgo Faring to pass the consent agenda minus the 3 items noted. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you. So now we are on ordinance on second reading and public hearings on any matter. The first one is 2024-54. It's a bill for an ordinance designating the Tower of Compassion as a local historic landmark. Are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, Jennifer Hewitt Apperson is here for questions or a presentation.
I'm happy to stand by for questions if folks would rather go that route, but I do have a few slides, just giving a brief overview if councilor members are interested.
Yeah, let's see the slides.
All right. So as noted, this is a public hearing regarding designation of the Tower of Compassion as a local historic landmark. The Tower of Compassion is a traditional Japanese pagoda that is located in Kanemoto Park in the Southmore neighborhood. It also features what's known as a torii gate, which is a traditional feature of pagodas. So the Kanemoto family, a prominent local family, they built this tower in 1973 and donated it to the city of Longmont to thank the community for its kindness to the family, particularly during the anti-Japanese xenophobia during World War II. This tower is likely the first Japanese pagoda built east of California, which is pretty interesting. There's a very detailed history of this particular structure, as well as the Kanemoto family and their contributions to the city of Longmont, as part of your package. So it's a pretty interesting read if people in the audience haven't read it either, or haven't read it. So in terms of eligibility, this particular property was built in 1973. In order to be eligible for designation as a historic landmark, a structure must be at least 50 years old. So it crossed that threshold last year. So as noted, the council, as you recall, agreed to pursue landmark designation for this structure back in March. It does exceed the criteria in addition to age for designation. Within the historic preservation statute, there are 8 criteria for designation as a historic landmark. If the property owner is seeking the designation, only one of those criteria needs to be met in addition to the age requirement. In the case of this particular structure, 6 of the 8 criteria were determined to have been met. So it definitely has some extreme significance for the city. There are certain benefits as well beyond recognition and bragging rights for local designation. Of note, if this structure is designated, it would then become eligible for grant opportunities to fund future rehabilitation and restoration efforts. So there are definitely some really good carrots to designation in this case. So if council approves local designation, staff would then pursue listing on both the state and national registers of historic places. One thing to note is the state of Colorado sesquicentennial is coming up in 2026, and History Colorado, which is the state historic preservation office, has an initiative they're calling History for All, in which they're seeking to add landmarks to the state register that are associated with traditionally marginalized groups, such as the Asian American community. If this property is listed on the state register, it would be only the 4th site in the state associated with the Asian American population. So it definitely puts Longmont in a pretty interesting place. So with that, staff does recommend that council designate the Tower of Compassion as a Longmont local historic landmark, and I will stand by for any questions or comments.
Thank you. So I am now going to open up the public comment for ordinance 2024-54. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this bill? Seeing none, I will close the public comment and ask for a motion.
I move ordinance 2024-54.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, that we adopt 2024-54. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you. The second one is 2024-61. This is a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel H-31B to Edward J. Cook. Are there any questions from council on this bill? Councilor McCoy?
I'm curious, maybe Phil can fill us in on this. As we're hearing from around several communities about airports and unleaded fuel and issues around that, are you hearing anything about how when these sort of leases come up, any sort of stipulations that have been put into place in regards to trying to move forward this, getting these planes that are being housed in these hangars transitioned over to unleaded fuel or electric, replacing things with electric planes or gliders or some other sort of appropriate FAA, because this is just the beginning. If we don't start talking about it, so if we're hearing it from other places, it'd be nice to know what's going on.
Great. So Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. Just to give you a quick update, the idea that the leases carry that information is beyond what the leases typically do. So this lease is kind of separate from that. But this city council recently passed the sustainability piece, or the resolution on sustainability at the airport, which really was covering a lot of that. And that's how we kind of moved those policy issues forward to the airport, people who actually use the airport, mostly those pilots. And that's how we've kind of tried to get them to understand what we're doing as a city to move forward in those policies by what you've done with that resolution.
Okay, thank you. I just kind of want to have the public hear that, because then at least they know that we aren't just sitting here reissuing, the land leases to these hangar owners with no action to try to improve on that.
Thank you. Good comment. Now I'd like to open this up to the public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that would, I see Mr. Grunsfeld, that would like to, yes? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see, I don't see her. Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I would just like to say that the sustainability resolution about the airport passed last year is essentially the action that can be taken by the city of Longmont to do this. We could also take action, and I assume that this is an ongoing effort to provide sustainable fuels via the fixed base operator at the airport. But what we cannot do, because it's in the FAA province, is regulate the fuels used by specifically planes that use our airport, whether they have a hangar here or whether they just live, just land here. That's not something that is within the city's power to do. So I just want to clarify that there are things we can do that we either have done or are pursuing, but attaching that kind of restriction to the hangar leases is not possible.
Thank you. Now I would like to open this up to the public for the public hearing. Mr. Grunsfeld.
Thanks. I want to commend the council for passing that sustainability resolution for the Longmont Airport, and especially the work of Marcia Martin in helping to draft that and work it through the system. It is a great first step, and the FAA is working very hard with fuel manufacturers to produce a unleaded equivalent fuel so that all airplanes can use it. It's turned out to be problematic on two fronts, one of which is technical, dissolving some of the seals in fuel systems or in the engines themselves. They're working on that. And then I think a harder problem is production. It's still a very small production run for overall fossil fuel production. But that's in work. The FAA has moved their sort of deadline, working with the Environmental Protection Agency, now till 2030. I'd like to think that that's, a reasonable deadline. I hope it is. It doesn't seem quite as far away as it used to. And so I think that's great progress. In addition to the leaded fuel issue, I'm a big advocate for electric aviation, but also for airport sustainability in general, which the resolution supports. And so one thing that maybe working with the Airport Advisory Board can be done is that, and working with Harold and Levi Brown, the airport manager, that specification on all new development at the airport should also be net zero. And it's really pretty easy because airport buildings like hangars have large roofs where you can put solar panels, which would make them essentially self-powered. And in fact, in aggregate, could also power the whole airport with just a few hangars. Prohibition on bringing in fossil fuel, i.e. natural gas, to heat hangars. Electricity is a plenty good way to heat hangars. That's how my hangar is heated. And so there's some other measures that are broader than just the fuel that that aircraft build. And then finally, I would encourage the city to work with the airport manager to put in grant proposals to install electric infrastructure for future electric flight. Boulder has started that, Centennial, a number of the other Front Range airports, because the electric flight era is just a couple of years away. And so making sure the infrastructure is ready for that will make Longmont a leader in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public part of this public hearing on 2024-61 and ask for a motion.
I move adoption.
So it's been moved by Councilor McCoy and seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. The next one is 2024-62. It's a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a 5-foot wide utility easement and a portion of a 5-foot wide LPC easement generally located south of 9th Avenue along the northern boundary of Lot 1 Trinity subdivision. Are there any questions from council on 2024-62? Seeing none, I would like to open the public hearing on this bill, 2024-62. Seeing no one from the public, I would like a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2024-62.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Christ to move 2024-62. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. The next one is a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a 30-foot wide access easement across the north side of the County Road 5 Storage SP LLC property. It's the CR County Road 5 Storage SP LLC property, generally located south of State Highway 119 and east of Weld County Road 5. Are there any questions from council on 2024-63? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing on 2024-63. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for a vote. A motion.
I'll move ordinance 2024-63.
Second.
It's moved by Councilor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Do we need a bio break?
I do.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, we are back, and we are at the consent agenda, the pulled items. And we'll start with 9A, and I'm going to let Councilor Hidalgo Faring address this since she had pulled it last regular session. And we didn't have time, that was our 2 o'clock in the morning. We didn't want to discuss it then. So what's on tonight's agenda? And do you have opening remarks, or do you want to just take questions, or?
Mayor Peck, we're here to answer your questions.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Hidalgo Faring.
Thank you. Yeah, so I had pulled it for a couple of concerns that were brought up by residents back when this was first presented to us in February, I think it was. So looking at the public process, I know there had been concerns about what, so in removing the public process, that is not in for the case of all development. And I really want to reiterate that because I'm still getting constituent concerns that it is removing voice from all development that is occurring. From what this land code change, it is only for people who build the 12% affordable housing on site. So really, who are these, what types of developments do these include? And how often does this happen? Is this going to be this sweeping where there's all development that happens is no longer going to have a public review process or public hearing process? Or what specific, just really go into what specific developments would this really apply to?
Thank you, Councilmember Faring. Don Burchett, Planning and Development Services. So there's a lot in that question. So first of all, as you noted, the proposed change is for the preliminary plat process only. The preliminary plat process is required when you create more than 4 lots through the platting process. So this code change is specific to single-family home development and what we would call attached single-family, which would be townhomes. So for sale lots. These are for sale properties that this would apply to. If they make 12% or more of those units available to meet our standards for single-family, detached and attached, then they would be allowed to skip the preliminary plat process and just go through the final platting process. So I have a slide that I can put up if you'd like to see that shows the preliminary plat process and the change that would take effect based on council direction to add an appeal process for the final plat prior to it being recorded at the county. And so I can change to that real quick. Thank you. So on the right-hand side, we have the preliminary plat process, which again will remain for any development that does not provide the affordable housing on site. So if you do a single-family development, a townhome development, and you choose to do the fee in lieu, you go through the preliminary plat process. You do not skip this. You go through the full gamut. And the preliminary plat process starts with a preliminary application meeting with the City of Longmont, a neighborhood meeting, which is then we give the written notice and posted notice of that meeting, a minimum of 2 weeks before that occurs. And it is done on the YouTube channel, so it's actually virtual, and people have the ability to attend virtually, or they can also watch it later because now it's been recorded and they can see what they missed about the project. So that's the required neighborhood meeting. When the application comes in, we require that it be posted with another sign that says it's under review, and we send notices to those same folks that attended, that we notified for the neighborhood meeting, which I didn't note is 1,000 feet from the property line. of the property being developed. And we give them the information that it is available for them to look at it and give us any comments. We do our review. Any comments that come in at any time through the development review process get sent to the developer, and we review those against code to see if there's anything that we may have missed or didn't see. And then ultimately, it goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a decision. The City Council is the appeal body for a preliminary plat. So that, again, would stay in effect for anybody who chooses to do the fee in lieu or any other type of meeting the affordable housing requirement other than on-site. The proposed change would be that we would have an inclusionary housing final plat process. So you have signed an agreement that you are going to provide those units on-site. Again, this is only for sale units, so this is townhomes and single family. You would still do a pre-application meeting with staff. You would still be, the way this is set up right now is that a neighborhood meeting is only required if the planning director requires it. That's our normal process for what are called minor development applications. So right now, there would not necessarily be, but there could be a required neighborhood meeting. If there were, 1,000 foot of notice for an inclusionary housing final plat, same as what we did for the preliminary plat, posting of the property, notifying people of that meeting. If we don't have a neighborhood meeting and we go straight to the application of turning that in, then we still do all the noticing. We still send written notice, 1,000 feet to everybody that's a property owner within 1,000 feet. And we also post the property that's under review. And they have the ability then to comment throughout the entire review process that is staff level, just as they did in DRC over under the preliminary plat. The difference is that instead of PZ holding a public hearing, what would happen is that if the planning director decides that the final plat is eligible to be approved, we would then give 2 weeks of notice to those folks that we told about this application, 1,000 feet mailing, notifying them that they have the right to appeal this decision and that they have a deadline of 2 weeks to turn in that appeal. And if they appeal it, it comes up to the city council. We have to hear that within 60 days of the appeal being processed. It's just like any other appeal process that you currently have. That's the intent.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I think that answered a lot of questions and calls that I have been receiving. So this change, really, so you think about what developments we've passed, maybe this past year, or how many have that who would have fallen in this inclusionary final plat?
In looking at what is under construction right now, it would be 1, maybe 2 habitat projects, and then the house pad project. Those were the only ones that chose to provide on-site affordable. All the rest have done either fee in lieu or looked at other options.
So they would still be following the preliminary subdivision
You are exactly
plat.
right.
So
Yes.
that's, that I wanted to make sure that the public is well aware and understand that process. The other piece, and I think the biggest source of consternation that's happening at least from what I hear in my constituents, is the number of apartment buildings going up. And I think being fearful that if we move this through, as these apartment buildings are getting built, they won't be having this public hearing, but those are 2 separate issues, and apartments follow a separate process.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, so when we updated Envision Longmont and we updated the development code in 2018 after Envision was adopted, one of the priorities that we took away from the public involvement that happened in meetings with council and planning commission was that we felt as though some of the apartment complexes were not being constructed because of the public process they had to go through. So changes were made in the land development code to make those administrative approvals versus conditional use site plans, which is what they used to be. Now, not all of them were required to go through that process back under our previous code, but half of them were required to either go through a conditional use process or the other were required to go through an administrative process. So right now, the way the code is written, unless they need a variance for something, it is a staff level review. It is similar to the inclusionary housing final plat process where they go through a staff level review, but the only appeal is appealable to the planning commission, and that's only by the property owner or by the developer. So there are restrictions, but that was a change that happened back in 2018 when the recent version of the Land Development Code was adopted. If council is concerned with the apartment complexes and feel that that process should change, you can direct us to bring that back to you, but currently that's the process. So it is a less stringent process than building single-family detached or attached homes that are for sale.
And so what these 4 issues that we're bringing up do not address or don't even touch the process of apartment complexes. So that's something I also wanted to kind of, to make that clear to public, so they understand that these are 2 separate processes, and that what we're addressing is incentivizing just incentivizing on-site affordable housing for sale units and single-family homes. I did have some other concerns, and maybe other council members will want to add on to this as well. The other one that had me concerned was around the open space buffer requirement, and again, it's going to only impact a few developments based on what we're seeing historically. But that open space, can you speak a little more to that? Is this talking about bringing the building right up to the park or right up to the open space? Or are there there's other criteria that kind of put something in between?
Of course. So first, as we have talked about every time we've come here, we are not impacting the SES. The 150 foot from either the St. Vrain or from Left Hand Creek, that setback. And that's a setback, not a buffer. Very important difference. We are specifically talking about either building roads or buffers between development and the adjacent city property, which typically would be your parks, your greenways, maybe your nature areas. So that is the area that we're talking about. Could somebody build right up to the property line depending on the zoning? Yes, they could. Okay. Typically, though, in order for construction to happen and to meet building and fire code, you do have minimum setbacks in order to have openings, either windows, doors, or other openings adjacent to or next to a property line to meet any fire and building codes. So because they can't control what's going to be built next to them, they need to be set back if they want openings in those walls. So it is possible that in some situations, somebody could build right next and right on a property line. Yes, with some of the zoning, that is possible. But they have to meet all of the setbacks. Even if there is no buffer required, a 20-foot, a 30-foot buffer, which is what was mentioned during the public invited to be heard tonight, you still have to meet all setbacks. So if a residential development is building next to a greenway with single-family homes, they still have to meet the 15-foot setback from their property line that is combined, the same property line as the greenway. They have to be set back 15 feet before that structure can start for the single-family home. So they have to meet setbacks. But again, the buffers would not be applicable. So in some of your mixed-use districts, like your mixed-use employment, your mixed-use commercial, those have 0 lot line allowances. And there are some of those properties adjacent to, for example, St. Vrain in the areas down by Left Hand Brewery, for example. If that area were to ever redevelop, those properties, the way they're zoned, technically, yes, they could have some 0 setbacks.
Okay, and setback, by definition, is completely different than buffer. So
yes.
I've heard people use them interchangeably.
Yes.
And they're 2 separate.
Under our code, they are 2 different things.
2 different things. Who owns where the buffer would take place, who owns that? Would that be the city's, the open space side, or the
It would-
property owner?
Buffers are still owned by the property owner, so then we either have an HOA that has to maintain it, if it's, for example, single family or townhome, that HOA would own that buffer area. If it is like an apartment complex, the owner of the apartment owns that buffer. It is theirs. It is not a requirement to be dedicated to the city.
Okay, so, and one of the issues that I've heard from residents, where buffers weren't maintained, and there is problem with dry brush, overgrowth, trash, so there's this whole other nuance that, you know, in thinking about what are the consequences of having those buffers.
Yes.
But I still value the use of setbacks. One more question, and then I'll pass this on, is, was open space or the parks, David Bell and his team, were they conferred in creation of this particular change?
So I did not.
Okay.
Our direction, as I understood it,
Okay.
was that the recommendations that were done
From
by the
Roots.
study, you
Uh-huh.
gave us direction to implement.
Okay.
So I was trying to implement by showing the changes
Got it.
in the code that would enact the recommendations by the study.
Okay, no, that's fine, you know, that would be on us, so, no worries.
Hey,
I'll
Don.
own that one.
Hey, Don, can you talk about the fencing requirements when you have open space behind the location and the specific requirements there?
I will, and if I'm not going where you want me to go, tell me. We have codes in the land development code related to the height of fencing, types of fences that can be built adjacent to city property, city open spaces. Oftentimes, the requirements on those are a 42 to up to a 48-inch height maximum. And the goal there really is eyes on either the park or the open space area from the adjacent properties to be able to see that. But from a pet standpoint, of which I am one, I've had dogs that can jump a 42 and a 48-inch height fence. So I do understand the restrictions that we have, but it also was meant so that we have eyes on the park, ownership of the park by those people that live there, which we feel is good from the standpoint of that if they see something in the park going on, either at dusk or at times maybe that something shouldn't be happening, they can reach out to the police and they can let them know. The other is that when you have a large wall of, say, 6 foot, it's easier not to be worried about what's on the other side of that. And in the past, we had problems with people dumping things over their fences into some of our park and natural areas. So that was another reason why we were trying to keep these buffers as well as the fences lower so that people, you know, wouldn't be as maybe prone to treat that as something that they don't take pride in. Is that where you want me to go?
You ready? Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Don and Molly, thank you very much for being here and letting us know. What struck me as kind of interesting is that you're saying that that first column there, the inclusionary housing column, that's the one that is the 12 has 12, both have 12% on-site affordable housing, you know, options there, but the one with the inclusionary gets a pass to do that. And what's also interesting is that we're seeing that a huge number of developments that are coming in are choosing column, let's call it the preliminary subdivision process, which seems to me that if we really want to have more inclusionary housing, that percentage should go up in that column there, trying to encourage more people to do column the inclusionary final plat process, so that way we actually get the buildings. Am I on the right path there?
Councilmember McCoy, I think you are. So the way that I would explain it is that The root study was looking at ways to encourage and increase the amount of housing that we get as affordable. And we believe that offering this, even though right now it's been habitat in the city, I think you will see some developers choose to provide it to save that 4 to 6 month process and a public process other than an appeal potential, and choose to provide housing. That's the goal. That's the goal of this, is to get more built affordable. And it's going to be of the kind that is ownership.
Well, that's my second point there. It seems to me that we need to maybe consider the preliminary subdivision plat, that percentage to be higher if they're going to all go there until we see some change. It seems like what we need to see is a sincere change, if because that's what we're hearing, and I think this is where you know, Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Farian was going down the path, is that, you know, we're not doing this doesn't apply to apartment complexes, and so how do we get this mindset, this change in our development community to go and actually build those purchasable homes in the inclusionary housing category there? And you've got to have, in my head, we have to have some stick and carrots, and one of the carrots is the fact that they save time. One of the other sticks should be that we try to also encourage through a higher percentage of that they have to you know, pay for cash in lieu, and so that seems to be a thing, and I guess we'll have to cross that bridge, and maybe that's something we can do in our you know, add to a future council meeting to discuss. I'm looking at Harold. Is that something that is the appropriate place to put that?
Yeah, a couple of things. We can, you know, if council chooses to make this adjustment, we can bring that percentage back. Council can also choose to, as we provide our annual reports on housing, to see in a year how many people are actually utilizing this. If you have a lot of people utilizing it, then maybe you look at increasing the percentage, or if we don't have, I mean, there's different ways we can approach it. So it's really whatever council directs.
Right, okay. And then to the issue of would you restate what you were talking about down near Left Hand there? You went through that pretty quick, so I think some folks might.
Let me see if I've got a drawing here that I think I took a screenshot. Uh-oh. Dallas? Do I hit okay? So, must have. Sorry. Should be good. Thank you. Okay. So this will show up on the screen? No. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So this is Hover. We have Pike Road up here at the north end of the screen here. We have Highway 119, the railroad tracks. This project was known as 1901 South Hover when it came through our development process. So as an example, we have Left Hand Creek that comes through and heads down towards the south here. And this development was for townhomes that were built. And so as an example, they had two different setbacks that they had to meet. and to stay away from, that would still apply even if this change to the buffer were to go away, okay? The two setbacks that they had to meet first was the wetland setback, 100 feet from any wetland. So all of these lots were shown outside of the 100-foot wetland setback on this development. That regulation would still be in effect, whether they went through the preliminary plat process, whether you get rid of the buffer requirements, that standard would still have to be met. The other standard that they had to meet was the SES, the 150-foot setback from Left-Hand Creek and the vegetation at the creek. And again, when you measured it, it was over 150 feet to those lots, and that was shown on the plans. They had to meet that. The buffer then, in this case, would have been a 20-foot buffer, but we have over 150 feet of buffer, well, setback from the area. So all that we got out of this was a few more plantings with the buffer standard, but that was really the only addition from a project that was built next to Left-Hand Creek, as an example.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Christ.
While you have this slide up, are there any pocket parks in the Lupine development?
Yes. There are, as I recall, there are 3 locations. There is a area down here which is more of a passive with some seating areas. Down in this bottom corner, there was an area, as I recall, right here where the cursor is, and then I believe there was a clubhouse on the north end here that also had a small area for people that met the pocket park requirements within the development.
Okay. Let me get back to my communication here. Well, this is a tough one because some of the comments we receive have to do with apartments. And one of the problems with pocket parks being removed is that if you have a dog, you have to go to somebody else's green spot to have them do their business. And so that irritates the neighborhood. And so it seems like we should at least have a little square or triangle of green somewhere in every development so that they have their own space for that.
And
I don't know if we need a full open space buffer requirement because I believe most of what we're talking about here is infill or that have some green nearby. Isn't that the discussion that we had, Mr. Burchett?
Yes, I would say that most of the development where we're going to have potentially no setbacks is going to be infill development in the corridors where we have greenways or parks. That would be very true. There are still some properties that we have over by the airport, some over by the sugar mill, but obviously those are not necessarily right near a greenway or a park, a city park, or open space area. And I did want to just correct one thing for you, just to make sure we're all clear. Council directed us not to remove the pocket park requirement. So that is not on the list today. The only change reflecting pocket parks is for multifamily, increasing the number of units from 25 to 50. And that was the typo that we had identified from the update at 2018. So I just want to make sure we were good with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me go back to your slide, your 2 columns. What I've learned through this process is it's more expensive for the developer if you get neighborhood feedback at the end of the process. So I'm wondering if it doesn't make more sense in this first column to require the neighborhood meeting rather than have it at the discretion of the director, so that at least when those signs go up and, you know, the letter goes out within the 1,000 feet, people have an opportunity to weigh in before they only have 2 weeks to appeal?
I think, you know, as long as I've worked here, public involvement has always been a priority of the council and the city. I think that at least my professional opinion on that would be that I think that would be a great idea.
Okay. And it would be more economical to have it up front than at the end?
Yes.
Okay. So could we consider as a council moving it to
With a motion, we can.
the neighborhood meeting? Okay, so I will move that we make the adjustment. I have to go back to my screen again. I think it's line item number 1, that the public engagement will happen at a neighborhood meeting after the pre-application.
At the final plat.
At the final plat. Inclusionary housing, final plat. Thank you. I will attempt to. Back to my slide. I'm moving that we include a neighborhood meeting after the pre-application on the inclusionary final plat. As it included to line number 1.
That is not required by the director.
Yes, it is not required by the director, but is, okay. To require. Not if required, but require.
I know. Councilor Christ made the motion that on the final plat, inclusionary housing final plat, we remove the requirement by the director to have a neighborhood meeting.
No,
We
well,
remove the
director.
requirement that it is by the director.
No, we require a neighborhood meeting, period.
So we make it
Not
required.
That
at
we
the
re-
discretion.
Oh, my gosh.
It's difficult.
Counselor Christ made the motion that on the inclusionary housing final plat, that we do not make the neighborhood meeting, that we require a neighborhood meeting, period.
After the pre-application, yes.
Whenever you want to do it within that stepping process.
Early on.
I know, I know. So, let's vote on that, please. Oh, wait, is there any discussion?
Yeah.
Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'm leaving my hand up because I have a question on the
So you
other
don't want to-
discussion as well that I've been waiting for. But
I
I
see.
understand that part of this is, that the two procedures are for different stages, preliminary subdivision plat versus final plat. But with that clause, if required by director, removed, can we explain just exactly how these two procedures are different? Because I'm a little vague on it.
Go ahead, Mr. Burchett.
So the difference is that instead of the Planning and Zoning Commission making the decision-making body for a preliminary plat, the planning director is the decision-making body under the inclusionary housing final plat. And there's a 2-week appeal period to where the appellant could request that this be brought before the city council for a final decision.
I understand, thank you.
Okay, let's vote, please. And that passes 6-1 with Counselor Martin opposing. Okay. So I also have a couple of questions about A. And my question is, well, that was section. I have a problem. Actually, you explained it. When this first came to us, I thought it was for LHA only. Developments, because Molly brought it, and I didn't realize it was actually from the planners, our city planners that brought it to us. So I just want to say that it didn't go through the normal planning process, did it? No. And why didn't it?
So, Mayor Peck, we were brought in as the route policy folks finished up the study and presenting to you. And you were asked whether or not we should move forward with implementing those recommendations of the study. We were then brought in to identify areas in the code that needed to be changed to enact those recommendations. So we worked on that. And then we brought those back to you. That was our understanding of the direction. If the intent was for us to go through our normal process, then this would have gone through more review, which would have included the Planning and Zoning Commission and any other groups that would have been impacted by this, so that you would have had that. We took this as a priority of the council that you wanted this done and brought back right away, so we did not go through that process.
Okay.
So if we misunderstood, we are very apologetic, but that
I
was understanding.
misunderstood. That's why I'm asking for the explanation, because I misunderstood this. And I'm glad that Councilor Chris made that motion, because I don't ever feel like we should take the voices away from the public when we are developing our city. It is their city as well. And I was going to say that I did not want the infill to be part of the first plat, because I assumed that it was apartments as well. And I thought, that's not going to go over well in the neighborhoods at all. So I don't have to say that. But I do have a problem with the 25% increase if the entire development is affordable. Did I read that correctly? It would be a 5% increase, not a 20, it goes from 20 to 25.
Correct.
So I misstated that. So, again, as I think through this, I think that was answered. I'm trying to read my notes. The one thing that I want to reiterate, and I hope that the public hears it loudly, is that the buffer is not open space. Because in public invited to be heard, it was referred to as open space. And that they are afraid that we're going to be taking away all their open spaces. It is the property of the homeowner. We are just saying they can develop to their property line, which I think is more understandable than the buffer. But I did talk to Natural Resources today, and the one thing that I know is that buffer is full of trash sometimes, because grass clippings get thrown over the fence, weeds are not taken care of. So do we have staff, because that will be thrown in the parks, and do we have staff to clean that up? Looking at what is there now in the buffers, it can be, no one takes care of it at all. So whatever they throw over that fence is going to be up to our.
So I think we do have park staff. I think the difference in this case is that if they're putting material on city-owned property in the parks, we would actually be working with our code enforcement to take the appropriate action to ensure that that doesn't continue. Right now, as they're putting that stuff on the homeowner association property, it's a homeowners association responsibility to ensure that that doesn't occur. So it's a slightly different question, but just like anyone else, if they're littering or doing anything in our parks, we'll take the appropriate action. That isn't property we control in the existing buffer, so I think that's part of the challenge of why it continues to become issues in those locations.
Okay. That's all I've got. So, Councilor Hidalgo-Faring, do you want to move?
Oh, no, we have Martin, yeah. Councilmember Martin.
Oh, Councilor Martin. Gosh, this.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. a couple of observations, because I think this was really good the way it started out, and I don't really think we should be messing with it any more than we already have. But the thing that I want to point out is first that the buffer zone is in the case where where the property is adjacent to a park or open space rather than some other land use zone. That's kind of a little redundancy in the code, right? Because the original reason for that buffer zone was to protect people in residential zones from being right up next to an incompatible land use. And so when you've got a buffer zone to keep you away from a park, which is desirable to be next to, it's kind of redundant to take land away from the property owner in order to ensure that. And I don't think that quite came out. So I just wanted to say it, and Mr. Burchett, you can correct me if I'm misconstruing that, but I think that's what really happens. And then the other thing is, as has come out since I raised my hand, but maybe it needs to be emphasized a little bit, is this idea that of throwing property over the fence or putting property in the buffer zone, that regardless of who is responsible for cleaning it up, it's a code violation. It's a code violation whether the land is maintained by the HOA, or it's a code violation where the land belongs to the property owner and they're putting their grass clippings or whatever in the park. It was already against the law. We shouldn't be considering that as an objection to this ordinance. And what's true and what's always true is that we address those code violations on a complaint basis. So the people who see it and find it objectionable need to be calling code enforcement, because that's how Longmont works. So that's all I got. And I move adoption of this as amended if nobody has anything else to say.
It's been moved by Councilor Martin and seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring to adopt 2024-60 as amended. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Now we are at D, 9D. Councilor Christ, you pulled that.
And Mayor, Senior Planner Cody is not here tonight, so I'll do my best to act in her place.
Thank you.
Okay, what's interesting about 2024-66 is that it's an amendment to the concept plan. It originally included 2 houses that were already positioned on the property, and now they would like to remove that and gain 2 units. And what I'm wondering, I know in the original plat that the developer paid a fee in lieu, which was to cover about 2.5 units, which would be the 12% requirement. But now that they want to, the developer wants to gain 2 more units, hoping that we could have a discussion about encouraging those 2 new units to be attainable, or at least like 80% of AMI instead of fee in lieu. I mean, normally when you add 2, it would go up to about 3 units for the 12%, but it would be nice to have those 2 new units be attainable on that property. So I don't know where to go with that, Mr. Burchett. Is that something that you would discuss with the developer? Because I don't think the developer is here this evening.
Don't see him. So we can definitely talk to him tomorrow and let him know of the concern that you've expressed. I guess the only thing is that unless we get 4, I don't
Exactly.
know that I can do any more than just let him know the concern.
Exactly. Okay. So,
So, if that's a road council goes down, the ordinances that are established actually set the options that the developer has. So in this case, they could choose to do an attainable housing and as part of one of the options, and it adjusts the percentage based on the number of attainable homes that they put on there. They can choose to put affordable housing. They can choose to do fee in lieu, but it's a list of options that they have available to them. I think if council wanted to require them to do that, I'm not sure that the existing ordinance, Eugene, you're going to have to jump in with me. I think we've had this conversation before, and I think the existing ordinance, it's their choice in terms of what road they take.
Did Molly leave?
she ran for it. Yeah, she is.
Molly? She's coming.
Sorry, I don't have those details at the tip of my fingers. It's complicated.
So Molly, the question is, on the affordable housing ordinance, my recollection is that the developer, the way the ordinance is currently structured, has a list of options that they can choose from.
Correct.
There's
For
nothing
inclusionary
that,
housing,
for
correct?
inclusionary housing, there's nothing that says we can tell them to do something.
No.
Okay.
They are required to provide 12% affordable. You can do that by providing the units on site, paying the fee in lieu, or selecting one of the other options.
Or you can do attainable, which then will adjust the percentages.
Yes.
If you hit certain price points. It'll
Yes.
lower the affordable housing requirement.
So we have an ordinance that has an amendment that adds 2 units from the original concept plan. So I'm wondering if we could have that revisited to make those 2 new units attainable, or at least have that discussion with the developer. And I also would like to hear what other counselors think and have them weigh in on that topic.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'm concerned looking at this. I hear exactly where you're coming from and understand exactly what you're saying. The thing that I'm looking at with this, and I'm looking at attachment. Let me see here. I think it's the concept plan. Make sure I'm looking at that right. As I look at the concept plan, yes, it is. As I'm looking at the concept plan, I see fences on this. I see a one-way in and one-way out, and I see an emergency access. I see fences everywhere on this and everything. And though maybe there's, yards associated with each of these lots, I don't see any sort of, access way to any sort of parks that we do have in the general vicinity on the west side of this proposed development. And it kind of concerns me. I mean, it was pretty clear when they were coming forward with this that the neighbors were not thrilled with this development. And now we have nothing for, families to bigger spaces than just their yards to, run and play and things like that. And it concerns me that this is just such a little isolated development that there's, and there doesn't seem to be any access to these outside parks. Maybe Danielle or David Bell or somebody can, if you've looked at this, is there something, an access point here that I'm missing? Or to a park? Is there a park close by? Maybe you don't know, and that's okay if you don't know, but maybe Don Burchett does.
Councilman, excuse me, sorry, Councilmember McCoy. The project, as it's proposed with 24, would be below the 25 threshold for requiring the pocket park for single family. This is an example
I
of.
see that, but I also don't see any access to anything that might be west of this that would be accessible.
So the neighbors that are both to the north, the west, and the south were all very adamant through the public process that included the original time it came through of restricting any access into their development and to their open space areas. As a result of that, what is proposed right now is the arterial sidewalk connection on Airport Road that will continue north and tie into the sidewalk network that is in the Somerset development that would allow them to go to the parks or to the Greenway. But that is the only proposed connections right now because of the concern that was expressed by the neighborhoods.
So we talk about connectivity. One of the issues that Councilmember Christ is pulling off here is 9I. And we talk about connectivity with our trails and things like that. And now we're going to let a development, a homeowners association tell us no?
So, Councilmember McCoy, the open space that is to the north of this property, that shares the north property line, is owned by the Somerset Homeowners Association. There were not any public access easements. There were not, at that time, back when this came in back in the late 90s, there were no pedestrian connections provided from their paths or their trail system to these adjacent properties. So it was a miss back in the 90s of not having that. We're doing our best to at least connect to the existing arterial connections that we have so that they have access to the neighborhoods and to ultimately to the parks that we have in the greenways.
I see you guys are doing your best. I'm concerned about the Somerset neighborhood doing their best to be inclusive in a community that's extremely inclusive, and shame on them. I'm concerned about what sort of precedent that sets.
I'm looking at attachment number 3, which is from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I think it's on page 3. They're recommending conditional approval of the concept plan amendment with the following conditions. And the first condition is a robust landscape buffer and privacy fencing must be installed along the north, west, and south sides of the property. And the fencing must be installed prior to construction. Now, so we had a discussion about fences. So the question is, a privacy fence, is that a 6-foot fence that is going to be right up against the landscape buffer?
That was the intent that that the neighbors were asking for during the public hearing that the Planning Commission was trying to accommodate.
And that landscape buffer belongs to the HOA, it's not city property.
That's correct. And in the way that this is currently laid out is that it would be the individual lot owners to maintain, not the HOAs. And so that's still being looked at would be looked at through the preliminary plat process, assuming that this is approved.
You mean inside the fence?
Correct.
Okay. Because I think, this is my recollection, that the The yards will be about 0.28 acre lots. Am I correct? I think I remembered reading that. No, what is it? 24 lots.
Looks like I'm seeing some that are 6,000 all the way up to, looks like 13,000 square feet. So anywhere from 0.3 of an acre to 0.13.
Okay. So there is some green space for them.
There is some.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I need a motion, don't I?
I don't know, because I'm not sure what you want to do.
Yeah, that's the problem. What's it? I just want to see if Marcia had anything to say. She doesn't.
So, are you finished? I have a question while Councilor Christ is thinking for a minute. When I look at this concept plan, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought a development had to have 2 egress points for first responders, for, where is it on this concept plan? I don't see it.
Yeah, so the primary street entrance is down in the southeast corner of the property, which is probably the most visible.
Yeah.
The other is an emergency access,
Here?
which is just south of the water quality stormwater detention pond north of lot 13.
Oh,
on the-
okay. It looks like there's a fence running across it. That's why.
There is a gate, because it is for emergency access, not for the public to access, because Airport Road is an arterial, and so we limit access points onto arterials to maintain their integrity.
Okay.
All right, I think our best way forward is just to move this forward so that we can have more discussion. So I will move 2024-66.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Chris, seconded by Councilor Martin to move 2024-66. Let's vote. Oh, excuse me. I totally. Councilor Christ, you had pulled 9I as well. Oh, and that passes 6-1 with Councilor McCoy in opposition.
And Mayor, planning staff will forward the idea about attainable housing again, but
Thank
it's up
you.
to them if they do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Christ.
Okay, 9I is about eminent domain. Sorry, still clicking on my, using my mouse to click around here. I think this project is going to get expensive for the city. I'll just be direct, because of the eminent domain aspects of it. And I think we should table it for a short period of time, because I think things are going to change in that corridor. So, Ms. Cassidy, tell me what you're thinking.
Councilor Christ, it sounds like maybe that is a discussion among council. I'm not sure there was a question for me to answer in that.
I just want your feedback on what I just said.
Maybe I can help a little bit, is that a lot of work has gone into this trail. And the last time we talked about it was, do we want to pursue eminent domain, or do we want to we still work with the client or the property owner to see if he would allow the city to use that piece of property to finish this trail.
If I can jump in and help too.
Sure.
Council's already voted
Yes.
for us to take this action.
Right.
The reason that we're bringing back is there is, what was it, Danielle?
There is a technical or clerical error that was made when the resolution was put together. There were 2 legal descriptions for the permanent easements, and one was missing. So because one was missing and we want to dot all our i's and cross all our t's, it's back in front of you because of that.
So start from there. So council's voted on this once. This is bringing it back for the second legal description. The other piece on this is, as we've talked about during the last session, this is actually related to a CDOT grant. And so the timing on the grant, we're hitting that deadline in terms of when we need to spend the funds with the CDOT grant. I know we have engaged or tried to engage with the individual on a number of occasions. And I think we did present the final offer.
Correct.
About a month ago, or?
August 15th.
On August 15th. And so we've made numerous offers to the individual. So at this point, I think the issue is really time related to the CDOT grant, because if we can't hit the time requirements, then the grant's in jeopardy.
And didn't we already pass, council said to go ahead and pursue eminent domain if the property owner did not want to sell or to?
You did.
Yeah.
But for the issue with the second legal description not being included in this, we would have already proceeded with that
Correct.
action.
Okay.
This is wrapping everything up to make sure that the second legal description is included in this document, and that's why it's back before you today.
I am still torn on this project, so I think it's probably a no for me again. Just because this came back again, it was another opportunity to revisit the situation. So it's a no for me today, but I just wanted you to know why.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McCoy.
Mayor Peck, thank you. I'd like to move R-2024-64.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough to move 2024-64. Are there any more comments? I would like to say I'm going to vote for this because in the original one I voted against the easement, but the motion passed. So I vote definitely to clean up the legal part of it and bring it back. So let's vote. So that passes 6-1 with Councilor Christ opposing. And that is all we had from the consent agenda. So we are now going to general business with the 2025 proposed budget presentation. Are we all good up here for? Okay.
Good evening. Mayor and City Council, Theresa Malloy, Assistant Chief Financial Officer. And so our budget presentation tonight is going to cover employee compensation and benefits, which will include the pay plan and then our retiree retirement plans and the health benefit plan or fund. We're also going to talk to you about our insurance funds, self-insurance funds, and then we're going to do some budget summaries. So the overall budget summary by fund, revenue projections, and then we're going to get into a little bit of the general fund budget, talk about some general fund reserves with you, and then the use of fund balance, and then we'll wrap up with the public safety fund budget summary. So I'm going to turn it over to Joanne, and she's going to start us off.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Joanne Zias, Human Resources Officer. I'm going to be talking to you about employee compensation and benefits. So to start, I would like to just take a real brief step back to 2024 and some work items that were implemented in that year and then remain in process for 2025. The largest work plan item that we had was a compensation study that we contracted through Mercer. The city took this compensation study to make sure that we were remaining competitive. We had a very challenging talent pool, and we had a lot of changes occurring. We had turnover rates that were more than doubled. We were really struggling to find qualified candidates for a lot of our positions. Our hiring challenges really had some large projects stalled. We also had some staffing issues, in particular in public-facing areas, and we wanted to make sure that we were competitive and we were actually following our policy and meeting our competitive marketplace. Mercer completed their compensation study. We were able to implement their recommendations throughout the pay plan in 2024. What was missing in 2024 was positions that were specifically municipal facing. And the reason for that is because Employers Council had not let us know that they were making changes to their plan. We did not have updated data for that. We, in 2025, now have that changeover which has occurred. And so we're utilizing pay factors, which is the new data set for municipal positions. So with that, in 2025, what we are seeing is being able to match the labor market for our municipal positions. We have defined that as employers in the Denver metropolitan area. It is mostly municipal cities. We also have some counties that are incorporated when it's appropriate to that specific position. We also have the benchmarks that we retained from 2024, so that's our public and private data, and those are our Mercer benchmarks, so those are just updated for this year. As a reminder, our compensation philosophy for quite some time has been to strive to pay competitive market rates. All the way back to 2017, we had received direction from council to move towards a philosophy of paying at 102% of market. That figure was brought into place because what we found is that we were utilizing our staff for a lot of different things. So our staff were doing more than many, and we wanted to make sure that we were, one, competitive, and two, recognizing that there was these additional duties that were placed on many of our positions because of our staffing. In applying our philosophy to 2025, we did adjust for the new benchmarks in the 2025 pay plan. We did update midpoints so that positions where we were below the target market range, they are now updated. Because of budget reasons, we are recommending that we retain our philosophy of paying at 102% of market, but in our actual pay for 2025, paying at 100% of market. As always, we have some special position recommendations in place, so our collective bargaining is going to follow the CBA contract. Those were negotiated, they were approved by council, and those are also based on market. For LPC, we still have step positions, and the reason for that is because that is the way that we can best match what others are paying in those positions.
And the steps for the lines people, right?
Correct. little bit of information in regard to benefits. We are going to continue with Kaiser to continue to provide our health care. We did do a RFP this year, took a look at everything that was out in the marketplace, and what we found is that Kaiser came back most competitive for us. In order to meet some of our utilization challenges, what we did is some plan design changes, and so after our plan design changes, we're looking at a 3.71% total increase. But with that, we will be adding a deductible and adding some plan design changes to bring that rate down. We also were able to make a change to our triple option plan and change that into a choice PPO plan. So what that means for our employees is that they're going to have additional flexibility to be able to select providers, in particular in town. So that will open up Longmont United for our employees. It'll open up UC Health. So they will have the opportunity to make changes within, still utilizing the Kaiser plan, but able to have a wider variety if they choose that option. We're not quite sure where the future year projection is. We are monitoring it closely. We're doing what we can to try to make sure that we're keeping our utilization down. But we do anticipate it's going to continue to be a challenge just based on the needs and based on the cost of health care. And we're also seeing that many other municipalities are facing the same. With VSP, not any changes to that. We're going to have them continue to provide our vision care. For Delta, we are going to continue with them as well for our dental care. There is a 2.95% increase for them. They have given us a 2-year rate guarantee along with that 2.95%. We did an RFP for our dental as well to make sure that we did have competitive rates and we had the best plan in place. And Delta came in very similar to others. They're already our provider. And so rather than have a disruption for not really a benefit, we decided to continue with them and ask for that guarantee. Mines and Associates has been our EAP. The organization has been very happy with them. They've been able to provide some pretty exceptional service, including some specialty areas for public safety. We are going to continue with them, and we're in year 2 of a 2-year guarantee. Just going forward into the future, we are taking a look at our employee benefits. We want to make sure that we are looking in particular at voluntary benefits that are not currently being offered so that we're able to have a full spectrum of plans for employees. We do want to continue to analyze data, make sure that we're competitive with our salaries and adjust as appropriate. And we are recommending that we keep 102% of the target for salaries. We can't reach it this year, but we still think that that is the target that we would like to try to hit.
Real quick, yesterday there was an article in CNN talking about jobs. And it was an interesting article because basically they were talking about how job creation slowed in a lot of industries. A few industries are defying the slowdown. One was healthcare, and the other is law enforcement. And I would say further in the article they talk about government jobs generally. And when we look at that and we see a lot of the job, when you look at our social services really tied to healthcare, obviously law enforcement is continuing to be something that they're seeing naturally. But what struck me was a paragraph where they said U.S. job openings have fallen substantially across the board since they reached a record high in March 2022, down about 37% through July. But in state and local government, excluding education, openings have declined by just 7.6% during the same period. A lot of that's law enforcement, but what you're seeing is in the governmental sector, openings are still pretty high, which is highlighting a lot of what we're talking about when we're seeing some of that competitive pressure for staffing.
Any questions before I pass it back to Teresa?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, I think we're passing it over to me, actually. So, so I'm going to start with the pension funds. I'm going to take you through some of the different benefits and then through the general fund and public safety fund summaries. Some of these areas, we have a lot of information in your council packet on some of them. I'm not going to take you into the weeds in my presentation, but there is a lot of background on some of them there for you if you're interested, so that you have an idea of some of the history of this and how we got to this place And also, it's there for our own benefit, so the staff has a history of it as well. So it may be a lot of information, but it is useful to us at times. I'm going to just keep you at a higher level, hopefully. So we're going to start with the fact that the city has 3 defined benefit pension plans currently. 2 of them are closed plans. They're old hire pension funds, one for fire and one for police. Currently, those plans are both over 100% funded. The police plan just got back over the 100% level in this last year, and Old Hire Fire plan is 137% funded. So they're both in strong shape. Every 3 years, we've considered benefit increases for the retirees in these plans. Since they are funded, we are able to do that. If it's not totally funded under Tabor, we can't technically do a benefit increase without fully funding it somehow. So fully funding the increase itself. So for these 2 plans, since they are fully funded, we are recommending a 2% per year increase for the past 3 years, which would mean a 6% increase for those retirees and beneficiaries at the beginning of January. These plans are down to 6 members in the police plan and 8 members in the fire plan. So they can easily afford this. There'll be no additional contribution required by the city at this time. I'm going to move into the general employees retirement plan. So that one is for all general employees. That's an active plan, has a very large employee base of about 800 active employees, and also close to 500 retirees and beneficiaries at this point in time. So it was fully funded for the longest time until 2008 with the economic downturn. And since that time, we've been trying to build it back towards it. We cannot do benefit increases like I just discussed for those 2 plans because of the fact it is not fully funded. So it's been quite a while, about almost 15 years, I think, since the last increase was approved for the retirees in this plan. We have been continuing to try to move to be more aggressively fully funding this plan, but it's a long haul. Actually, in 2016, we made changes to the plan so that, to the funding policy of the plan, and we changed it so that it's funded over a closed 30-year period, which was important because we were doing a rolling 30-year period before, which would make it almost like we would never get it fully funded. So we are on a course to try to have it fully funded by 2045. It's 24-year amortization since January 1st, 21 is when we started to do that. The gains and losses in here are smooth and recognized over 5 years so that we don't have large swings in contribution requirements and things like that. So we recognize 20% of each year's earnings over the 5-year, moving 5-year period. This past year, the GURP had a slight increase to its unfunded liability to $41.7 million. It's now 83.6% funded, which compared to the police and fire plans doesn't look great, but compared to a lot of other public plans, defined benefit plans that some of you may be in, that this is in much better shape. And the reason why is because we do not have a built-in cost of living increase, and there have been no increases for that long because of that. So that's one of the reasons why it's pretty well funded for a public plan. Our contribution requirement is slightly decreased in this year. We're not recommending any change to the contributions as they were budgeted for 2024. Again, we're trying to make wherever we can aggressively continue to fund this plan at more than what is minimally required. Last year, we talked to you about it. We've, in the past, had contribution requirements not being met, and so what we did is we had a transfer coming from the Health Benefit Fund. We'll talk about that fund and why we can do that in a few minutes, but we've done transfers in the past to make sure that we've been meeting the required contributions in this GERP plan. And last year, we approved a $700,000 contribution, and we also did at that time discuss doing the same type of contribution in this year for $200,000 from, again, the Health Benefit Fund to make sure that we're funding this strongly. So we will be bringing that back to y'all. We asked you for approval last year, but we haven't made the transfer yet, and that requires a resolution to be approved by the City Council, which we'll do in the next month or two. So I'm moving then into the police and fire retirement plans for current police and fire employees. 3 years ago, we opened up the opportunity for our membership to enter into the Fire and Police Pension Association of Colorado. They offer both defined benefit plans and defined contribution and a hybrid plan on a statewide basis. So a number of our employees entered those plan options. Other employees stuck with the city's plan, which is the first one shown there, the City DC plan. The other three are the FPPA options that our active employees moved into. And down at the bottom, underneath the table here, is the number of new hires we've had since then that are required to go into the FPPA defined benefit plan. So the four plans shown in the table will, over time, become, in a sense, closed to city employees. No new employees are allowed into any of those options. And so as people terminate or retire, that numbers continue to go downwards. But this is our contribution requirements vary because of these different options that were available to them. The maximum requirement is 12.1% for our defined contribution plans. We have committed to match that with the city's defined contribution plan for the employees that did not leave that plan. And really, it's being driven by the FPPA requirements. So it changes based on some actual requirements for their defined benefit that are a part of these hybrid and DB plans. So that actually has gone down, is going down for this coming year. It went down from last year, we were at 12.75, I believe, or 12.95 maybe, and now it's 12.1%. And that's how those are all those contributions are all within this year's proposed budget as it was shown there. So now I'm going to move into the health benefit fund unless there's any questions on any of the retirement plans. So you heard from Joanne about the Kaiser increase. I'm not going to repeat that. It was 3.71%. I did build that into our pro forma for this health benefit fund. Our contributions from the city to this fund are really based on how much they're a percentage of compensation citywide. And so depending on how much our benefits increase in costs, we sometimes have had greater percentage contributions in the past. We went down to 14.5% for 2024. We're going to be able to maintain it at 14.5% this coming year as well. A lot of that's due to increase in compensations, which in turn is increasing the amount of dollars that are being contributed at 14.5%. Employee contributions for most of these benefits are based on it's a 15% of the total premium cost for those that the city charges for versus health insurance for individuals. There is no employee contribution. It's for family and for single plus one that we do have a required contribution, premium contribution for employees. So the health benefit fund, besides insurance benefits that are being provided, that most of the ones that Joanne just mentioned, took you through, the health, the dental, the life, the EAP. We also are providing, we put money from the Health Benefit Fund towards wellness incentive costs, police and fire physicals, those are voluntary physicals, public safety counseling program that is again another voluntary benefit. And then our Health Benefit Fund has a projected fund balance at the end of this year of $9.4 million. Pretty significant balance. The reason why most of that is there is that we were self-insured for our health and dental benefits until, I'm going to think about 20 years ago. And at that point in time, we took what was left in that fund after we went to fully insured, and we moved it into the Health Benefit Fund. And it does allow us to consider, and we do from time to time when we put it out to bid, whether we think we might want to go back to a self-insurance approach to our health program. So that is why we still maintain this balance at a significant amount. Over and above what we took from that self-insurance fund 20 years ago and put in here is really just, again, the outcome of our operations and the contributions by the city to this plan, which allow us to be able to try to stabilize that city contribution as much as possible. We are projecting that the balance will increase in 2025 because, again, the growth in salary is probably going to outpace the growth in the premium increases. So if there's no questions on the Health Benefit Fund, and that is, again, where we would recommend the contribution to the GERP retirement plan coming from, that $200,000 I was talking about. So I'm moving into the self-insurance funds. I just want to update you on them. Last year, we brought them to you. We thought we did have a concern about our liability self-insurance fund balance, and we felt we were strongly funded in the workers' compensation self-insurance fund. So council did approve us transferring $1 million from the workers' comp fund to the self-insurance fund. And they're in much better shape this time at this point. At the end of, at this point in time, this liability self-insurance fund has it's actually was the end of last year, has a $4.1 million fund balance and $1.1 million of claim reserves, that's claims opened. And the workers' comp fund has close to $6 million fund balance and $684,000 of claim reserves. So we're not increasing contributions to either one of these funds this year. Okay, so now I'm going to move into our overall budget summary. So again, there was a number of attachments that accompanied the council communication that are addressing give you some of the data that I'm covering here in more detail. The total budget was $469 million this year. It's a 5.79% increase, $25.72 million increase more than the 24 adopted budget. There's 45 individual funds in here, the same as last year's budget. And any large percentage increases or decreases for an individual fund are due mostly to capital expenses. CIP projects have increased from $63 million to $71 million in 25. This is the first year of the CIP. We're only looking at comparing the first year, 24 for last year and 25 for this year. Attachment E in the handout is the proposed budgets by fund, shows you the revenue and expenses for each of those funds, or the 45 funds as compared to what they were last year. This second attachment F, or I should say the one after that, attachment F, is showing you the budget by funds, and it's separated by operating expenses and CIP expenses so that you can see the differences in the CIP budgets from year to year, as well as the operating budget changes. So with the CIP, the major CIP decreases in individual funds our almost $5 million decrease in the open space fund, $1 million in the electric CIF fund, $948,000 in the sanitation fund, $816,000 in the airport fund, $772,000 in the electric and broadband fund, and a $500,000 decrease in the golf fund. The funds with major increases were the street fund with $5.7 million increase, water fund with $4.3 million, the public improvement fund at $2.6 million, storm drainage fund at $1.8 million, and the TCIF fund at $1.45 million, and finally the sewer fund at $1.3 million. And again, the budget summary we gave you a couple of weeks ago, right? Did give you some detail on which of those projects were driving those numbers upwards and downwards, or just upwards mostly. So I'm going to move into the revenue projections that make up this budget. So this is looking first at what our sales tax is doing for this year in 24 through the first 6 months of the year. Sales tax was up 5.8%. Our use tax was down 1.7%. Combined, it's a 4.6% overall increase. I do have July numbers. Hopefully you'll get that out to you all tomorrow and by email, but it was pretty much flat, if I think not a 1% decrease for the month of July. So, we kind of been on the lookout for things to kind of get slowing down in the second half of the year. And June and July have certainly moved in that direction so far. So, and those are the first 2 full months without Costco having, Costco does have a year-over-year type of increase versus not having it before. So we're not having as much overall growth in sales as a result. And we're expecting that to kind of continue. I do think we will have a good month or so of use tax coming at us I think next month, from what we know from the building permit perspective. So that'll help us out some, but we're still projecting that we were going to end this year with a sales tax of 4.3% growth and a use tax of a 2% decline, for an overall 3.42% combined growth. And then projections for 25, we have sales tax at 3.18%, use tax at 2.4%, and then the combined growth amount there at 3.08%. So, we do take a deep look at all of the different categories of sales tax and use tax, and we try to trend it out to make these projections for both 24, particularly for how we would end 24. And then likewise for 25, we do a similar approach, or a look at what the population growth is projected to be for the city, as well as what the economic growth is projected as well. And we use that to come up with some of these projections, as well as what we know about what will be happening next year over this year as far as new business or things like that. The property tax revenue estimates. So, I could go into this for quite a deep ways, and I didn't want to take you too far. We do have this on the agenda for next week as well, where I want to try to at least give you a lot of detail on what we have to date, what we know about the new legislation that was passed very recently, and what we're doing here in the budget process. But what I wanted to point out to you here, at least tonight, is that last year was a similar year to this one, in the fact that there was legislation that was passed during the first half of the year. There was a initiative on the ballot last year, and so when we were putting together our projection for sales tax last year, which was a growth year, we were a reappraisal growth year, what I should say. We were looking at what might happen if the, I think it was called Proposition HH, were to pass. And so what we did is we set aside what was a SWAG type projection of potential impact to what we might lose of $2.8 million. And so that was, we budgeted that money. We had been notified of it by the assessor's office as to how much growth we would have if HH did not pass. And so we budgeted that amount, but we budgeted as a one-time, we put it on into one-time expenses. We budgeted as a one-time revenue. So our intention at that point was to use that, if possible, in this year's budget process as ongoing revenue. So we, again, like I said, we've gone through a similar property tax year as far as we've had legislation again in May from the state level, and we had a couple of initiatives on the ballot again that were going to address that. And the state, again, took action here. And by the way, they did take action after we adopted a budget last year that also kind of set some stage. But what we found with the legislation from last year was that it was subject to being backfilled, and we found here in 24 that we were getting pretty much almost fully backfilled. And so there was really not any impact on the city from the legislation that had been, 22 is when it was passed actually originally. So we had more revenue coming in on hand than we anticipated, which is, of course, a great thing from helping us here going into this budget process. So what we've looked at this year is a similar situation and the potential impact of what was passed in May. And when Teresa and I went to a kind of a lunch and learn that Weld County put on a couple of months ago to help us understand the new legislation. And we came away with a prediction that the state made, that someone from the state made, that was that we were going to pretty much lose about 8% statewide as a result of this. And we know it wasn't necessarily me saying that Longmont was going to lose 8%, but they were saying that the impact could be a 8% reduction. I still don't know when they were talking about. I think at this point, it came across to us that it was an 8% this coming year, and that's what we did in putting together this budget. But that's not what that legislation was doing. That legislation isn't really having an impact until the next fiscal year, 2025 tax year for 2026 budget. So we did, again, decided to take a cautious approach here. Plus, we did not have any information from Boulder County on what our assessed value was going to be. And so what we did use is pretty much took last year's amount that we budgeted for ongoing property tax for 2024, and I decided to budget the exactly same amount of ongoing property tax again for this year as well. So that is how we built this budget for ongoing revenues. And then just 2 weeks ago, into August, we got our assessed values from the county, both counties, although we had already received that estimate from Weld, but we didn't get Boulder's, which of course is most of it, until the 24th, I think, of August. So that what that's telling us is that we will probably have about $2.68 million more of property tax than what we budgeted. And now again, at that point in time, that was before the next round of legislation. So we've wrote information to you in the summary budget message. It's kind of probably been altered somewhat in this council communication because of what we know now versus what we knew then. And it'll probably get into a little bit more changes as we learn more about this legislation. But again, it is not taking immediate effect. And so one thing I can say is that legislation, as well as the one that was passed in May, we are not going to get backfilled in either one of those. So that backfill aspect is not going to benefit Longmont any longer. So what we have done is we gave you a budget, again, based on last year's property tax. But what we are recommending, and I think we would recommend that we add the 2.68 million of property tax to the final proposed budget for you to adopt in October, and again to use that for one-time expenses, because again there's going to be an impact from one or all of these legislations, but it's going to reduce the assessment ratios. There's overall revenue limitations, property tax revenue limitations. We may be exempted from that, but from the assessment ratio standpoint, those are looking to be going down. And I'm going to get into that more next week. I think we might. We'll get you some information on that. And unfortunately, we're going to another CML webinar the day after next Tuesday, so that we can get even more information potentially on getting straight on this. So that is that's the property tax story. Any questions on that? Maybe it'll be a little less confusing
So
next
if
week.
we can go back real quick, I think.
Which one?
To the 2.68. Why we're recommending that in one-time expenses, and this is more for, this is for you all, but staff and everyone else, is people could say, well, why aren't you just adding that into ongoing expenses? Well, it's because we know now when the ratios will take effect in 2026, which means that impact we won't feel in 25, but we will feel it in 26. And so we don't want to add a lot of ongoing expenses knowing that the impact's going to hit you another budget, 2 budget years away. And so that's why, once again, we're recommending it in one-time expenses.
Okay, further revenue growth. Our building permit estimates for 25, single-family estimate of 110 dwelling units and multifamily of 710 for 820 combined. So the development revenue is driven based off of those numbers. And then moving into the general fund budget summary now. So this is just going to focus on the general fund. The budget for 24 was 112.9 million. This one's 119 million. $6 million or so difference over 24. Ongoing revenues, the change in ongoing revenues included a reduction in ongoing revenue of 361,000 and an increase of 6.38 million. The major decreases that we had in ongoing revenue, 100,000 drop in our natural gas franchise revenue, 100,000 drop in credit card convenience fees. This is we're also reducing credit card convenience expenses at a greater amount than this, so it's actually benefiting us with the way we're starting to actually benefit from this, but we're never getting hit by the credit card convenience fees now before they even reach us. So that's why we're reducing it on both ends. Fines and forfeits continue to go down. The cable television franchise revenue continues to go down. The major increases in ongoing revenue, sales and use tax at $2.1 million. We do have the total sales and use tax is about $2.5 million increase, but there's a portion of it that's one time, which I think you'll see in a upcoming slide. Our interest earnings, our investment earnings were a lot of our longer-term investments, which have been we were at very low rates from a few years back, are being cycled out now with much higher returns comparatively. So we are benefiting from that currently in all of our funds. Recreation revenue is increasing by $480,000. Building permits, again, tied back to those estimates that we were looking at. And electric franchise revenue is increasing $385,000 off of their revenue increases. Traffic camera fines, you want to take this one?
So, based on conversations that we've had with council, and information that we're getting from the work that we've been doing on Vision Zero, what we're clearly understanding from a traffic perspective is that most of our main roads, in the conversation, could be classified as, forgot what the word is that Cammie used, but basically a traffic enforcement issue, just because of the amount of speeding and people that are running red lights. So I believe the first meeting in October, we're bringing an ordinance to you all that will allow us to use red light cameras and also use speed cameras, so we can place strategically in our community. We, as part of doing that, primarily to really get a hold of the traffic violations that we're seeing in our community. You all have made me aware of the number of emails that you all get from your constituents about speeding in different areas and people running red lights. As we were looking at that, we also began looking at what other cities were experiencing as a result of putting these in place. And so this is, I would say, a decent estimate in terms of what we anticipate the revenue coming from this. I want to be very clear. This is not a revenue driver. This is the issues that we're seeing within our community. I think I gave you an example of we were testing a camera system at 17th and Main. I believe that in 5 months they had about 15,000 cars run a red light. A lot of those were people that got stuck in intersections. And so then if you hedge down, and we just talked about this generally, and you just said, well, there were 5,000 people, you take the 15,000 number and cut it, just take a third and say we had 5,000. That's a lot of people. And then when we start looking at the wrecks that we're having in our community and embracing the Vision Zero point that you all have asked us to look into, when we look at traffic accidents that have SBI, serious bodily injury, or fatalities, speed is a big factor. And that's part of the Vision Zero plan is you want to reduce that kinetic force in an accident. And Cammie presented to you all and said, you may have more accidents with Vision Zero strategies, but they're less severe accidents. And so just looking at the data, we need to do something, because as I was talking to our transportation staff and our public safety staff, we see what's coming into us from our community. We also know the challenges that we have from a staffing perspective, in that we can't put officers at these locations. And so we're going to have to, we need to start trying other options that maximizes and really becomes a force multiplier to really deal with the safety issues that we're seeing in our community. So you will have some items coming to you. We have plugged in a revenue line item.
Okay, so again, other revenues increasing. Well, the next few are like transfers from other funds, things like right-of-way maintenance went up $294,000, administrative transfers for $239,000, and broadband franchise fees. We have not had a franchise fee on broadband except for on dark fiber. We have decided, again, we're looking in this go-around, because of the low amount of revenue that we were, new ongoing revenue that we were getting from sales and use tax and none from property tax.
Jim, were you advancing the slides?
No, I wasn't.
Oh,
yet.
okay.
I want to
I'm sorry to
explain the
interrupt you
broadband.
then.
That's okay.
Okay.
But because of the low amount of revenue, that increase that we were getting from our major tax sources, we are looking for where can we find other sources of ongoing revenue. And so we did put in place, it'll take the council to do a financial policy in the near future to change the policy on the franchise fee for broadband to also to address their overall revenues at just 1% versus the dark fiber, which I believe is at a higher percentage. And then the ambulance provider revenue is another 200,000, which is, I think, what we were already receiving, right? So, yeah, it's not new. So, so the proposed budget ongoing expenses now, looking at those, again, the same amount of increase overall, but the increase in ongoing was 8.45%, and the reduction in ongoing expenses was 2.4 million. So the decreases, the major decreases in ongoing expenses. Now, some of these are expenses that we moved from funding on an ongoing basis to a one-time basis. And that's what the first two of these are here, the attainable housing transfer and the affordable housing transfer. We moved park maintenance expenses of $300,000 to the Conservation Trust Fund. There's a reduction, this is a depreciation reduction in fleet lease charges of $388,000. There's a lease payment, a long-term lease payment that was ongoing that was hit the final payment this year, so that went away for $285,000. I talked about the credit card expenses already. We had a reduction in the amount of business personal property tax rebate that we have a commitment to with one of our economic partners. It went down $100,000. We reduced the exceptional pay budget from 2% of pay to 1.5% of pay. And then these two positions are both vacant positions or vacant partial positions in both cases that were eliminated. Library pages of one total FTE and a half traffic safety coordinator.
So obviously, there's going to be a question about the library piece on this. One, we haven't been filling those positions for a number of years, and they had some additional split positions. And what we asked them to do in this case is to actually consolidate the other components of that. They're page positions, but they're like quarter pages. We asked them to take 4 quarters and create a full-time position instead of having that broken up and then utilizing the remaining group to do that. And then when we talk about some of the adjustments we made to the Conservation Trust Fund, I think when we look to the future, we're also creating capacity to potentially utilize some of the not the conservation. Is that what it is?
I'm sorry.
Can you go
the
back?
Parks and Green, what are you thinking of?
Where we moved the
Maintenance
parks
to
maintenance to the CTF. The CTF can actually also be utilized on the library. It can be utilized on library, recreation, museum. And so we've been talking for years in terms of how can we utilize some of those funds. And so we shifted some one-time expenses, and we've created some capacity in the Conservation Trust Fund, which is the lottery dollars, so that we could potentially utilize some of those funds in the future to make some of the adjustments that we need to in the library. So we're trying to set some things up to actually benefit the library in the future. We just couldn't necessarily pull the trigger this year.
So major increases in ongoing expenses. Level 1 expenses are the increases in expenses from one year to the next that are like contractual or things that we are committed to and that we can't not fund. So we did start out with a larger amount of ongoing level 1, and we did looked through them very carefully to find out if we really thought they were or weren't level one, and then some of them were moved to other places or not funded at all if they were level two. So this 1.7 million is what was left over of needing to be funded. Then we had the collective bargaining pay and related benefit increases, where for the general fund it was $3.7 million. The non-CBA, all other employees in the fund, their pay and benefit increases were $2.3 million. We moved 3 police officers from the public safety fund into the general fund, and we'll talk about public safety fund next, but that was for funding reasons to be able to balance that fund. So that was an increase in the general fund as well. Fleet loan repayment increased by $127,000. Increases in bilingual pay and transfers to the museum services fund of $44,000. So, what's up? Yeah. Yeah, questions on any of those increases or decreases in expenses? All right, so we'll get into the general fund reserves. So this slide is showing you this year's reserve policy targets for '24. So your financial policy has a general fund reserve requirement that has 3 different types of reserves components to it. First is the required TABOR reserve, which we have to calculate every year. We do that every year after we close our books, so we're doing that usually in April. And that's the first one, the TABOR reserve of $6.3 million. The emergency reserve is the first component. The second component that is 8% emergency reserve. That's up to, for this year, $9 million. And then the stabilization reserve is between 3 and 8%. So our target is to get ourselves up to 8%. It's funded at actually this year, down below you see it's the stabilization reserve is funded at 5.51% currently. So we have all those, the first 2 are both fully funded. The stabilization reserve at 5.5% funded is giving us a total reserve of $21.56 million. I shouldn't say reserve target down there at the bottom. I should just say total reserve. So now with this new budget for '25, the proposed budget, and taking those numbers, because those percentages were all based on our total general fund operating expenses, since those are going up over $6 million. As a whole, it is in turn increasing some of these percentages. Still got the same TABOR reserve since we only calculate that once a year, but that's now at 5.3%, but still $6.3 million. 8% emergency reserve of $9.5 million now is the new target. Stabilization reserve from 3 to 8%. 8% would be $9.5 million stabilization reserve. So at the highest peak, it would be $25.34 million as a target for '25 for our reserves. What we are budgeting it at is we do budget the TABOR reserve full, emergency reserve at full. The stabilization reserve, currently, it would be at 7.34%. We've added $3 million to the emergency reserve this year. It's taken us very close to the 8% stabilization reserve. We always lose some ground on this, though, when we recalculate the TABOR reserve. That'll generally go up as a dollar figure, which will then, of course, take more percentage with it as well. So our total reserve will, again, that bottom shouldn't be a target. It's what we're funding. We're funding a reserve of $24.56 million. That won't change, but the TABOR reserve will, so it will reduce the stabilization reserve later in 6 months from now or 8 months from now.
Jim, can I ask a question?
You bet.
Where do you have these funds invested?
Well, I'm not telling, no. So we have the funds invested in a number of places. And about once a quarter, you may see an investment report that goes into your packet as an information item. And so over 50% of the monies are invested in longer term investment, mostly federal instruments, treasury, things like that. Those we use an investment advisor to work with on those. And so we don't go out past 5 years under the financial policy. So typically we will, when we initiate a new investment, we'll make it a 5-year investment, depending on, what the economic environment is. But certainly recently that's what we've been doing. The other less than 50% of it is in local government investment pools mostly. So that staff manages, and it's in 4 different actually more than 4. It's probably 3 different companies, but it's in about 5 or 6 different local government investment pools.
Okay.
And some term investments that one of those investment pools do offer to us with nothing larger than a 1-year commitment. So we have a certain amount of dollars tied up in that as well. But you'll get that at the end of each quarter. You'll probably see that a month following the end of the quarter in the packet. So sometime next month you'll get that report again.
Okay, and the reason I asked was the emergency reserve, how available are those dollars if we had an emergency?
So the money in the local government investment pools are readily available.
Okay.
Short of the 1-year investments that I'm making, the rest of them are all daily availability. So there's, I would say, up to $100 million of available dollars, that we could get to overnight if we needed to. So we are have no problem accessing these monies. We're just doing pooled investment for almost all of the city investments, except for like bond dollars, which need to be separated and things like that. ARPA dollars have to be separated, so we're doing those in their own local government investment pool accounts. But everything's pool invested, so they're all benefiting from the different rates equally. Okay. So if you ask me where the reserve dollars are, they're not specifically anywhere. They're in all of those investments.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
you bet.
So I think to your question, he's managing earnings and liquidity, and that's what you're hearing him say is you have different each investment's in terms of liquidity is different because you need money that you can access, and so it's set at different time frames.
And the city has a investment policy that the council reviews and updated within the last year, I believe. That is really the guiding force in how we do those investments, so that I'm not putting 100% in local government investment pools or 100% in a 5-year investment or anything like that. So we're trying to be as diverse as possible, but most importantly, try to be safe with our money. So you bet. Okay, the general fund balance in this budget, we are using just over $8 million for one-time expenses. And I tried to break down a little bit of that, where they were coming from. And what I realized tonight when I was looking through the property tax piece, that I forgot that a good piece of this is the $2.8 million that we had budgeted for this year for one-time expenses, because we did not use that money. Our intention was to, and is being used for the retiree health that we committed to with the collective bargaining contracts, and those haven't been paid yet, and a lot of that will be paid early next year. Part of it will be paid, the one-time payments we paid upcoming next quarter probably. So a lot of that makes up what was, or close to $2.8 million is in part of that undesignated fund balance, which in a sense represents mostly the operations from 2024, whether it be revenues over budget or expenses under budget. And that, and same place for where this emergency reserve, $3 million is coming from. That's what I just referred to that we put into the reserves, reserve requirement. So altogether, $11 million of fund balance is being used in this budget for either to go towards reserves or to one-time expenses. You will get detail on the one-time expenses beyond what I'm showing you here, all the way down to all the expenses, I think, in next week's council packet. So this is showing you the major one-time expenses. The public safety retiree health is just short of $2 million from the general fund. So also some of that from the public safety fund. Police take-home cars at $1.35 million. We talked about moving some of the funding for attainable housing and affordable housing into one time, and there was also some already coming from one time, and so that's total $1.3 million for the two of them combined. And then here we have some other projects that we were, it's not typical that we use general fund balance, but that we wanted to address some things that we weren't able to do within the public improvement fund with general fund one-time money, and that's what these first couple are. The St. Vrain Greenway for $414,000, and the Greenway connections for $400,000.
Those first two were related to the fact that we needed to hire new parks staff and we needed an ongoing funding source. So the three positions that you saw that were moved into the Conservation Trust Fund, we moved this into one-time funding because these are one-time funded projects versus utilizing ongoing funding. So that's part of that exchange.
Then radio replacements for public safety at $300,000, the cardiac monitors for the fire department at $300,000, and one time for the additional three, it's ground maintenance techs.
So this is the equipment for those three positions to maintain the new parks that we're bringing online.
Okay, so we're now going to move into the public safety fund. So these two funds were probably our largest challenge this year. Again, the sales tax was a factor for both of them. And of course, no new property tax was a factor for the general fund. But the public safety fund is mostly funded through the public safety sales tax. There's $18.1 million of sales and use tax in the 2025 budget from the public safety fund sales tax. We also have some grants and other governmental revenues in there and money from the firing range operations. The public safety sales tax is now 0.58%. It's began in 2006, increased in 2017. The proposed expenditures in the budget of $19.5 million include 106.03 FTE spread out over these 6-7 divisions, either within public safety or some support areas for public safety and for city attorney, children, youth, and families, and graffiti removal. The expenditures of $21 million are a net increase of 6.96%, $1.367 million. The budgeted sales and use tax increased by $861,000. Our proposed budget included increases in expense of $198,000 for level 1 expenses in this fund, pay and benefit increases of $1.54 million, step increases of $132,000, $85,000 for retiree health, $97,000 for death and disability benefit, and $12,000 for deferred compensation retirement. A lot of those, if not all, are the collective bargaining outcomes. The total of those new ongoing expenditures are $2.07 million. Now, I told you we only have a sales and use tax increase of $861,000. So we had less than $1 million of new ongoing revenue to fund $2 million of expenditures. So that forced us to make some changes within the fund. And we did need to eliminate 6 vacant FTE, 2 firefighters, 2 police officers, 1 core paramedic, and 1 communications supervisor. Again, all of these were vacant. And then we did, as I mentioned before, move 3 police officers from the public safety fund to the general fund. And that is the steps that we had to take to balance that budget. We have $1.54 million of one-time expenses in the fund for 2025. $537,000 for retiree health benefits, $411,000 for one-time resources, including things like take-home cars, radio replacements, ballistic vests, and cradle point upgrades, and a couple of CIP projects that the fund balance for the public safety fund was funding. $184,000 for parking lot rehab. Obviously, it's a S&J, and keyless entry cost of $407,000. So, looking ahead at the public safety fund, I mean, both these funds are going to be challenged in the near future. The public safety fund in particular, we did put a pro forma in the budget. I think we go out 10 years. And what we are projecting is that, with the current level of expenses and maintaining them, and the projection of a 3% growth in sales tax, which has kind of been our typical long-term projection over time, that it would not fund the growth in the expenses from year to year. So that is something that, it's either going to have to again be addressed by managing expenses, as we did this year, or else at one point, whether or not there needs to be additional revenue source for this fund is something that can also be considered once again. But it's really going to depend on the economy. So if we beat the 3% growth estimates, which, we look back over the last 10 years or so, I would say we probably beat it 8 or 9 times in those 10 years, then we may be able to handle that type of growth. And again, we know what our salary expenses are going to be for 26 because we've got those in a contract. And that's why we know we're not going to be able to fund it at 3% revenue growth. So if we have greater growth than that, then we'll be better off. And if not, there'll be more challenges that we'll be looking ahead at.
So on that piece, when we talked about it, and you look at, obviously, the market salary increases are the bulk of what we were looking at. And when you look at, well, why are you eliminating the 2 vacant positions, and why did we not think about that in terms of the market adjustments? We did. The reality for us was we couldn't not hit market on those positions, because if we would have made the adjustment there, we could have ended up with more vacant positions because we're not paying market salary based on what I kind of talked about earlier in the CNN article in terms of what's driving some of these costs. And so we made the decision that we need to stay at market so we can remain competitive, knowing we were going to have to make some other decisions as we looked at the public safety fund. And so that, I just wanted you all to know, that's what was in our mind, is we need to get these folks to market, because if you don't get them to market, there's bigger problems that you're going to have to deal with down the road.
I didn't put this in the slideshow, but at the same time, we're also looking at the fund balance in that fund, because that's how we fund the one-time expenses. We had a pretty strong fund balance in that fund. It's still not not a weak fund balance. I think we were up around over 10 million at one point. We're getting closer to $4 million or so after some of the actions we've taken in funding some of these annual costs for 25, but as well as what we've been doing to also supplement the funding for the S&J Center, the rehabilitation project. So that we, again, the way we get the fund balance to grow is through the sales tax exceeding projections. So if it doesn't exceed projections, then we will be challenged, not right away, as we will be with the ongoing expenses, but down the road we will be for one time as well.
So what you'll see when we talk about the Public Improvement Fund is for next year, we put 1.2 million for next year in the Public Building Fund. So that could go to needs that we're seeing across the street. So we don't continue hammering the Public Safety Fund and make it worse. And today we talked about the one-time funds that we're putting in based on the property tax. We may look at some of those to potentially help, because we don't want to keep drawing that fund balance down on the Public Safety Fund. So we're looking at other things within the overall system to balance it. And then obviously you saw where we absorbed 3 of the positions into the general fund, which was another issue that we had to solve. And I think over the next year or two, those are things we're going to have to be looking at, is how many personnel do you have here versus what you're seeing the performance. And a lot of work is going to have to continue to occur over the next 2 years.
So that's the extent of that presentation. If you don't have any other further questions, what I have here is what you'll be looking at next week. I think we're the only thing on the agenda next week. We'll be going a little bit more into the property tax revenue. We'll cover new positions, the one-time expenses, LDDA's proposed budget, talk about Human Service Agency funding. We have mental health and addiction, early childhood capacity building, grants and external funding sources, and then we want to focus in a little bit on some of the things related to the street fund and the sanitation fund. On the following week, we will have our first public hearing, and we will review financial policies, and that's it right now. So if there's something that y'all were looking forward to hearing about in the budget that we haven't brought up or isn't on this list that I just identified, we can, if you let us know what that is, we can still add that into the mix and bring that back to you in the next week or two. So with that, I think that's it.
The one thing I'll say is this is a pretty bare bones budget compared to what you're used to seeing, but I think you're seeing most of it's salary, most of it is level 1 expenses and fund balances. There's not a lot new in this when you look at it, and so it is different than what you've seen in previous years, because this has been a tough one.
Basically, it's employees and keeping the lights on.
I mean, it's the level 1 must pay
Yeah.
bills, it's the staff.
Yes.
And then it's managing some of the issues that we're seeing in the Public Safety Fund, and trying to minimize the overall impact. And I think I told you all when we were getting ready, it's kind of that focus on the core.
Yes.
That's what you're seeing in all of this.
I kind of think it's really good to see this bare bones and how much it costs to run this city. It's good for the residents to see that. The only really new building that the city's doing is the Justice Center. Building it, bringing it up to 2025 standards.
We're rebuilding it.
That's what I mean,
to make
yeah.
sure that we meet building requirements. And, something that I'm thinking about, and I'm not sure, and it'll probably be later in the year, but, when we had to solve some issues this year, One thing that I will say is I think just the way that staff engaged in the conversation, and really came up, and we were collectively all looking for ideas. You know, some feedback that I got after that was, you know, Jeff Friesner talked to me and said, hey, you know, I've never thought about this, or I haven't thought about this. And so, you know, what's in my mind a little bit, and it's going to depend on this, is maybe in February we start a different level of review to start having some of these conversations to re-engage, so that we don't lose the creative or the ideas that were coming up now when we start looking at some of how we do things on a regular basis. And so I'm still trying to frame my mind on that one and manage workload for all of these folks. And so I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking through that to add almost a pre-budget kind of conversation, to have folks look a little deeper into what we're doing. And then I think at some point we want to talk about, I need to put this on the agenda, I think I forgot to tell you, is how we're actually utilizing technology as, you know, something that helps augment what we're doing, that doesn't necessarily require additional bodies or additional expenses, and helping us become more efficient where we can. And so I know that's something that I want to talk about, because as we continue to see the financial pressures, we're going to have to rely on some technology to really make us more efficient and effective. And really, you know, you typically hear this, it's a military analogy, or you'll hear it in public safety, but how do we have a holistic force multiplier for our organization utilizing technology to make us better? And that's part of the conversation we've been having with council. And, you know, I think a lot of people refer to it as smart city, but I think it's really embedded in how do we manage our dollars to the best of our ability, without necessarily having to throw a lot of positions at something.
Yep, it's coming. Thank you, Jim and Teresa. What's her name? And Sandra. Okay, that was very interesting. We're now at final call. Public invited to be heard. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak, JD? No. It's being, see, the attorney's right behind you. He can explain.
Oh, well, come on up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it wasn't. Come on down, JD.
So he could have left hours ago.
No, we hadn't voted on it yet.
No.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know I'd have to wait around this long, but I just had a few things I thought might be helpful, and I made some changes here too. But good evening, Mayor Peck and council members. Thank you for your decision to deny the Modern West 2 proposal. You had a lot of information to digest in a short time to make a proper decision. There's plenty of blame to go around for the Modern West 1 and 2 having gotten so far along without proper input from airport stakeholders. Ideally, this property should be left undeveloped for safety and noise compatibility with the airport. The property could be sold to the city for open space at a fair market price. As you know, the property is adjacent to current open space and could be leased for agriculture use, which is more compatible use. As the airport sponsor and the Land Development Authority, the city should be using FAA Advisory Circular 150/1594B to ensure land in the airport influence zone remains compatible with use of the airport. It offers excellent guidance and direction. The advisory circular is not a regulation that you look at after a development proposal to verify it is compliant. It's guidance to follow to prevent having incompatible development proposals in the first place. The zoning in the airport influence area should be looked at through this lens. The FAA is willing to help with property purchases that ensure land use compatibility. It's regrettable that Modern West 1 is so far along because no airport stakeholders were notified, and the FAA Airport Management Office was not notified. Changes to the Land Development Code, Title 15, to ensure notification of airport stakeholders of development proposals in the airport influence zone would help prevent something like this happening again without proper input. And I was just making a note of, you had item 9A, and it seems like the noble needed push for affordable housing could result in less public input and process. It seems to me the affordable, sustainable part of Modern West proposals blinded many to the disastrous location for high-density housing. And then lastly, I wanted to say that I hope to see many of you in the community at the Longmont Air Show this weekend.
Thank you, JD. Thanks for staying. Hanging in there. We're now at Mayor and Council comments. Councilor McCoy.
All right, thank you, Mayor Peck. I was just going to reiterate what JD just said about the air show, and then also draw people's attention to the 9 News story about our efforts of our park rangers and concerned citizens doing the right thing and cleaning up the dog beach at Union Reservoir. And you can find that, I think, at 9news.com articles, and look at that. Poop problems closed Longmont Beach. And we had Chelsea, our ranger, do a great job of explaining what was going on with that. And lastly, Art Walk this weekend. Don't forget to stop by the Callahan House. They have several artists there, more than they've ever had. So make sure you drop by the Callahan House and Gardens when you're out there at Art Walk.
Councilor Hidalgo Faring.
Thank you. I was going to mention about Art Walk this Saturday from 4 to 8 along Main Street. The other thing I wanted to share with council members and folks is I'm working with the Countryside Village community and youth in that area. We did a community canvas painting project. We worked on it on Monday, and then again, we'll be working on tomorrow. We had a fantastic turnout of approximately 40 students from preschool through high school. So it's pretty cool to see them all engaged. Their final projects will be displayed at Art Walk in the Arts and Public Places booth. So it was very exciting. We got a lot of positive feedback from parents. They were very appreciative that their kids were able to get out from in front of their technology and TV and actually be working and engaging. So we had that opportunity to have the older kids working with the younger kids, and it was a phenomenal event. Wednesday, we're going to have children's, youth, and families with us as well to help facilitate, as well as volunteers from Arts and Public Places and our Indian Peaks teachers. So they did a great job at showing up. So thanks.
I would like to tell council that I am going to be gone this weekend, and of course the city manager. I'm going to be in Arizona visiting family, and we'll be back Sunday evening. So it's a good time to tell you I'm going to be gone.
Okay, thank you.
So, and I see no one else in the queue, so city manager remarks.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney?
No comments, Mayor?
Yes. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Chris to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. Bye, Marcia.